Hello and welcome to And the Runner-Up Is. This week on the show, we're talking the 1983 Best Actress race at the Academy Awards, where Shirley MacLaine won for her performance in Terms of Endearment. But why did she beat fellow nominees Jane Alexander, Meryl Streep, Julie Walters, and Debra Winger? We'll explore all this and more today on And the Runner-Up Is. Hello and welcome back to And the Runner-Up Is. I'm your host, Kevin Jacobson, here to talk the 56th year of Best Actress at the Oscars, which cover the films of 1983. We'll be discussing how Shirley MacLaine won, why the losers lost, and who we think was the runner-up of this Best Actress race. And my guest today is one of my most frequent guests at this point, who I've had on the main show and bonus episodes. His last episode of the Best Actress series covered the iconic Year of Years of 1950 with Judy Holliday and the All About Eve ladies, Eleanor Parker, Gloria Swanson. We had a great time there. And now he's back with another year in which we have double nominees. Editor-in-Chief at AwardsWatch, the Aurora to my Emma. Welcome back, Erik Anderson.
Oh my God. I feel like I should be paying rent at And the Runner-Up Is because I've been here so much. The Aurora to your Emma. That's going to that's so triggering, Kevin. My goodness. But sorry. I'm totally gonna take it.
Okay. I'm very excited to talk about all of these movies with you. And I mean, yeah, I realized after booking you that like you really managed to book 2 years where you only had to watch four movies. I'm like, you are so lazy.
Hey, it maybe was an accident. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure.
We'll never know.
Okay. Well, anyway, before we talk 1983, let's talk Best Actress as a category. So last time I asked about your favorite Best Actress win of all time, and you said Shirley Booth for Comeback Little Sheba and Jane Fonda in Clute. Very good picks. So as an alternate question, I would personally love to know, what is your favorite Best Actress lineup of all time?
This is so hard because I was going through and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 that I was kind of like going through because there are some absolutely gorgeous lineups, including this one, which I think is incredible.
Mm-hmm. And the one we talked about last time, right?
And 1950. I think it's hard to not kind of classically pick 1950 as a major year, but I think 1980 is amazing. I think 2018 is amazing. And I think when we're talking about what is the best lineup, it needs to really be like all 5 of these nominees need to be unimpeachable. It's not like 4 are great and 1 is pretty good. They need to all absolutely be it.
Yeah.
And there's just a lot. 87 is great. Yes, 82, I think. Yeah. I think just for the purposes of the question, so I don't keep rambling, I think I might want to pick 82. I think wow. I think it's outstanding. And it, you can ask me tomorrow and I might pick something different, but it's hard to argue with Jessica Lange and with Meryl Streep at the absolute height of their powers in this era. It's just a fantastic lineup, period.
Yeah, Debra Winger, of course. You got Sissy Spacek. Julie Andrews coming back with Victor Victoria. Yeah. We had fun last week talking about that one, and
it's a wonderful example too of a really good broad spectrum of type of performances, so that we're not kind of all stuck with the same. And this year does that too, which I feel like we're less inclined now. I say we like we're, football fans talking about a game.
Our team, right?
Yeah. But I think voters sometimes recently are maybe a little bit less inclined to hit up a comedic leaning performance.
Right. That's very true. Yeah. Well, my other question for you, last time you told me your most heartbreaking losses among the nominees were Judy Garland for A Star is Born and Glenn Close for Dangerous Liaisons. Great picks there, too. So let's open it up completely, and I'll ask you, what is your most heartbreaking snub of all time in this category?
So I said this a little bit before we started that I am going to be very on brand with this pick.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if you're listening and you know me, you probably know exactly what I'm going to say. And it is Madonna in Evita, which I think is an absolutely just incredible, real, committed performance. I loved her Globe win, even though, it's a very Globe win.
Yeah.
But I loved it. I love that she got something from it, because the awards response to that movie just through the season was kind of weird. The Oscar nominations it did get and didn't get, like, how do you not get costumes for a movie like this? Doesn't make any sense. But, I don't think I expected Madonna to get in. There definitely is a certain amount of side eye given to some musicians that go into acting. It's not treated the same. So you get a bit of a mixed reaction. And so I didn't expect her to ever get in, but I think it is so full-blooded, and what it took for her to get even the role, the history to get to that role is gorgeous and insane and wonderful, and that deserves its own Broadway musical. But I think it is an absolutely beautiful performance, and I don't know how you can even get to like the sequence at the end on the deathbed and go, okay, I may have questioned Madonna's acting ability before, and that would be a fair and valid question. But she is, like I said, unimpeachable in that moment. And I love the film, but I just think she's fantastic.
Yeah, really good pick. And yes, very on brand, but that's fine. And I feel like I do also really like that performance. I'll probably end up covering it on A Woman Robbed at some point because, again, there's such a story there. And I also feel like it's weirdly related to multiple situations that we have going on this year, including Barbra Streisand and Yentl, who had her own issue of like, that got weird nominations here and there, but nothing for her. Also, Cher and Silkwood had her thing with like, oh, is she a serious actress? And she proved to be and got in. So like, weirdly very related to this year we're talking about, even if we're not going to be talking about those performances.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that was inspiring it was that exact thing.
Yeah. Shall we get right into it? 1983. Let's go back 40 years now. Here we go. Let's talk about it.
Let's do it.
Yes. 56 Academy Awards. The nominees were Jane Alexander in Testament, Shirley MacLaine in Terms of Endearment, Meryl Streep in Silkwood, Julie Walters in Educating Rita, and Debra Winger in Terms of Endearment, with the winner being Miss Shirley MacLaine. So before we break down these performances, Eric, you've already kind of mentioned that this is a great lineup, so tell me your overall thoughts on this collection of ladies here.
I think it is, and it's inevitable that we're going to, talk about this aspect of it, but it's fascinating that this time period and the few years before and a few years after, the conversation of nuclear meltdowns and potential annihilation was so forefront. And, I was 12 years old at this time, and we had like weekly tests at school, which literally amounted to hide under the desk, and hopefully you can avoid, being obliterated in a nuclear holocaust. So to have two nominees here that focus on that, the height of that fear and reality of the time, because it's hard to express how real the impending doom of that felt. It was surreal. And I think it's a great period that talked about it and had stories about this that were very fresh and very current, and were also kind of full of the possibility and the fear of possibility, and not just like, here's 10 years later, other except that Silkwood was essentially like 10 years later. But instead of telling a story 10 years later, when you have more information and you can kind of do a reflective analysis on something, to kind of have it in a moment of when it was happening, like Testament, for example, very small Northern California town. I'm like, okay, cool. That could be my town. That looks like where I live right now.
You could be Jane Alexander's kid.
I absolutely could be, age-wise.
Yeah.
So, and I saw all these at 12 and 13 and when they came out. So it's just such a rawness that I hate to be a back in my day kind of person, but I think what qualifies as current ripped from the headlines, raw and real now, is very different than what it was then. And especially talking about a story like Testament, which is so completely stripped and minimalist of what it's doing. And Silkwood is telling as much of a true story as it can, and was sort of allowed to do. And lots of drama between the real life people and family and how that story was told. In terms of Endearment, not related to that at all, but a fantastic mother-daughter era story without being directly relatable. There were so many things that were very relatable for me in this, and that my mother and her mother's relationship was very similar and caustic, and we had similar situations. I'll go into one of those later. So I saw it with them, and I feel like there was some type of cosmic change in them seeing that together. Yeah, it was weird. And then Educating Rita, and this is weird because on all of these rewatches that I did last week, I have developed some very different opinions of them from when I originally saw. Some better, some worse.
That can happen.
Educating Rita, for example, far less than I
get that.
Originally saw, and even in follow-up. So I had several things that were just like, what in the fuck is this? What is even happening here? But even if my esteem in that film has lessened considerably, I love this lineup. And I do love all of the films. I think it's very representative of 83. I think it's representative of a lot of social and political moments in history. So
yeah. Well, there's a lot, I think, that we could talk about with this, both macro and micro, of what this lineup is and what it represents. I do think I agree that it's very of 1983, for good and for bad, arguably. Although I think the only one that doesn't feel exactly like it's specific to 83 is Educating Rita. That feels like it could come out in 1967, and I'd be like, yeah, it would be the same kind of movie. But on the whole, really, really great lineup. I think, even as someone who wasn't alive in 1983, there is something about the actresses and these films where it just feels very nostalgic to me. It's one of those things where I'm nostalgic for an era I never went through.
Totally.
I just think that most, if not all, of these performances are very empathetic and very lived in. I love seeing the double nominees from one film, and I do think, not to preview my thoughts too much, but it is one of my favorite just two-handers of the same gender in one film. And, totally complementing each other, but also doing different things. And we have these great character actresses like Jane Alexander and Julie Walters, who would both have so many great supporting parts over the years that have stood out, but proving here that they could also, lead a film with their very own specific kind of energies. And then you do, of course, have the requisite Meryl here, pulling off another transformation, but not in a way that's like the drag version of Meryl that people have kind of accused her of in like the 2010s, like the August Osage County, the Iron Lady, Florence Foster Jenkins. She's not in that kind of mode. This is a very grounded kind of like lived in performance from her, but also still transforming into a real life person. So yeah, I mean, like, this is one of those lineups where I think if any of them are in weaker years, they would probably be my winner, but they just happen to be all together here. So I am pretty much ready to jump right into it if you are.
Yeah.
Okay. Starting here with Miss Jane Alexander in Testament. We're starting heavy. So Jane Alexander, we have talked about her before, of course, for her performance in The Great White Hope back in 1970. She's great there, but also a little bit borderline supporting. She goes on to get 2 supporting actress nominations in the 70s, both for big acclaimed films, All the President's Men, where she has a great brief performance, and then Kramer versus Kramer, where she's obviously overshadowed by Meryl, by nature, but still really good there. And she also earned some Emmy nominations for some TV movies and miniseries. She wins an Emmy in 1980 for Playing for Time. Plus, she has more stage work and gets a Tony nomination. So, like, she's keeping pretty busy, and she's bouncing all around between film and TV and Broadway, just going wherever the great work is, essentially. And then she goes on to star here in Testament, which is her 4th and final Oscar nomination as of now, and the one that ultimately does give her the most to do of her nominations. So Testament actually started out as a TV movie, basically, for PBS for their American Playhouse series, but apparently it tested really well with the studio and they decided to put it in theaters. And I think also worth noting before we get into it that Testament is also directed by a woman, Lynn Littman, who she's only the 3rd woman to direct a Best Actress nominated film, after Dorothy Arzner way back in the day for Sarah and Son and Joan Micklin Silver for Hester Street. So the 3rd in 56 years. Way to go, Hollywood. Way to go, Academy. But Testament is all about an ordinary suburban family living in California. The mother, Carol, is Jane Alexander. Her and her husband, played by William Devane, have multiple kids. One day when he goes away, there's some kind of nuclear event that takes place, and everyone is forced to take cover and just try to cope with the after effects, the radiation that everyone's now having to deal with, and the death of the younger members of the town and in her own household, and this just impending sense of doom. So, your thoughts on Jane Alexander as an actress and your thoughts on her performance here in Testament?
I love Jane Alexander as an actress. I think her TV work is incredible. She definitely would have, I think, won an Emmy for this at this stage on for sure. Television. This is one of the films from this year, from this category, that grew in my esteem on the rewatch. I definitely really, really liked it at the time. But, when you're much later in life and time and experience kind of tells its own story of your life, you see things, you can see things very differently. So again, I was 12 at this time. So I was about the age of the oldest son, the only one that survives in this. My God.
Yeah.
And at the time it was, like I said, super relatable because the concept of a nuclear holocaust was very real. She suddenly becomes a single mother of 3 My mother was a single mother of 3 at this time, very new,
Wow.
like a year into being a single mother.
Hmm.
So, it certainly had impact I think I was 13 at this time when I saw it, because, movies were in theaters much longer than they are now. So when it came
Yeah.
to stuff like this that had a December release, we lived in a small town. So I probably saw it in like February or something, because Oscars were much later than they are even now.
This one was in April.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So I definitely connected with it in that way. But my idea of, actresses and actressing, even though it was formulating at that time, it really took much more time for me to kind of obsess over it and to really be like focused on women and just not really caring about actors and men in movies very much. So
with a few
this was,
but yeah,
with some exceptions, of course, but this was a great rewatch because it's a performance that is so absolutely not quiet, but controlled, and not so much a controlled performance, but the character is. She doesn't panic. I just, I don't want to say, controlled or reserved in a way that is like a negative.
Right.
It's a performance and a character that at every moment is serving her children and their safety and keeping them calm.
Yeah.
without just simply like lying to them to make it less serious, except for Lucas Haas, who is my goodness. Oh my God, so devastating.
I know.
He's really, really good in this, and everything with him is absolutely fucking devastating. But yeah, it is such a thoughtful performance, because it would be just very easy to always be hitting those smash plates notes, and she saves those for just a very few moments. And everything with the priest, with Hot Priest.
Very interesting development there. Yes.
Very, very, very. From the 2 scenes that I'm sure you know what I mean, the burial and then the other gravesite moment, which is just like, oh my God. But yeah, I just think it is a performance of such respect for Carol and for her children. I love this performance so much.
Yes, absolutely. This film really is such a knockout, and not in a way that you might expect it to be, just based on like the description and the sort of time frame of when it's coming out. It's not really sentimental, like it's not cheesy, I just think it's, more than anything, it's just chilling and tragic in a way that I think is still affecting like all these years later. Obviously it resonated in 83 at the height of the Cold War and everything, this like constant threat of annihilation, but it's also hard not to draw some parallels with like things like COVID or North Korea, or once again with the Russians, on top of just like the general existential threats that like we're always facing with like the world today. And I think the reason it works so well is that it's so non-specific about like what the event was. Like you have a little bit of speculation in the film about like what happened, but after a while it's just like, how do we move on with our lives after such an event has taken place? Like, how do we pick up the pieces and try to be a family again? How do we live with what's happened and not just like despair over everything? I just think there's a real maturity and an empathy in Lynn Littman's direction and her restraint, honestly, that I find really striking and just like painfully real at times. Like it's very well observed of human behavior. And I think Jane Alexander is like the perfect channel for that, and that sense of empathy. And she's just such a master of like subtlety and giving her characters such a lived in quality. We talked about this on her discussion of her in The Great White Hope, where she's just so uninterested in like the movie star part of being an actress. She's just in it for the work, and there's no vanity to the role here either. And it's like she's just a woman who has enjoyed her life the way it is, and that's pretty much it. Like, she still has her headaches with certain things now and again, but it's just like she's getting through it. Maybe she, like, in the beginning, like, she wants to, like, get in shape. Like, we get the audio of a Jane Fonda workout tape in, like, the very first scene, which is very funny for me personally to now have Jane in yet another wildly different stage of her career. But at the same time, it is reflective of maybe what your average housewife maybe would be invested in at this time, right? So,
oh yeah, my mother and grandmother had all of the Jane Fonda workout tapes.
Yeah,
this was that brief little snippet is maybe more 1983 than the nuclear blast.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a note of that before we get too much into it. But yeah, it's like we're seeing her just like carefully looking at herself in the mirror, considering her appearance in this very like serene sort of way. And she just has that great ordinary housewife kind of sensibility and attending to all her responsibilities around the house. And obviously this is all intentional because we're supposed to be seeing her as that everyday person and kind of like perpetually exhausted in that way, but still finding room for fun and like playing with the sock puppet and everything to make one of her kids get dressed. And also like these other great like beautiful, graceful moments where like she pauses and looks at her husband in the beginning and just like gives him a kiss. You can feel this protectiveness she has of her family, and it just feels so natural, so unforced in a way that really suits the character. And like if this is like Jane Fonda in this role, or even like Ellen Burstyn or Sissy Spacek, who I imagine could like play this part, I don't know if you would have the same effect of making her feel so, you know, down to earth and someone you can identify with and recognize as your neighbor, your wife, or you. She has that ability that I think very few actresses of her stature have.
Yeah, and I think to your point about Jane Alexander really kind of just being about the work, is kind of what makes her so perfect here, because those moments at the beginning, looking in the mirror and having some vanity, are really also there to show the banality of something like that, when the reality of life and death show itself. And I think that is practically a parallel for Alexander and her career and how she sees stardom versus acting, and or did, you know, at the time. So I there's just something so perfect about her in this part, and especially compared to who you just mentioned, who, you know, those were the top names. So, you know, if you picked names out of a hat for this role and started, you know, moving the pieces around, even from like these nominees, you could do that, but it would not be the same.
Right. I also feel like this is a little bit like superficial, but like her forlorn expressions that she has, there's no one in the business that can quite pull off that kind of expression quite like Jane Alexander, to like make you feel that kind of like despair and that those like quiet moments of desperation, as they say. She's the master of that. She really is. And not making it feel like, you know, parody, I guess, of being like, oh
yeah, or like she's pulling faces, you know, like others might tend to
others
do.
Might, perhaps, yes, who will go unnamed, and that's fine. Yeah, and then like obviously when the event happens, it's like she immediately is jumping into protective mode when they are like staying in the bedroom together, and her son mentioned something about like keeping watch. Like her trying so hard to keep from crying is really effective, because she's still keeping up that strength and trying to be that sort of stabilizing force for this family. So it's like she'll only really allow herself these quiet, private moments when no one's watching, where she can just kind of like exhale a little bit.
Yeah, and she has to. And I think any single mother that was watching this at the time will was able to, remove the situation of this post-apocalypse and relate to it in a very real way, that you are two parents, you are split between two types of people, the emotional and the stalwart, and you have to be able to turn it on and off at exactly the right moments, and just the amount of fortitude that takes. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's very moving work, And again, like all of her, like genuinely, like every conversation she has with her children, I find so moving and warm, and these things that seem like on the surface very simple, but it's just like she's trying to just like make the best of everything and trying to keep it together. And at a certain point, like in the beginning to middle, like there's not quite a sense of hopelessness about the future quite yet. So there is just this feeling of her being like, we can make it through this. Maybe it'll be hard, but like, hey, we've faced challenges before and we always come out okay. So like, let's just be strong for each other. Which is just like,
and
what makes it so much more heartbreaking as the film goes on.
It is, and that's why it works on a parallel level with just kind of any situation that they might have been up against, or somebody watching is up against. And her conversations with her kids are, even if it's a little platitudey, I mean, not like not in a bad way. It's just because they're young, but she never talks down to them in it. It's, again, to your point, Lynn Littman's direction of her and of the kids is thoughtful. It's beautifully reserved, and just the drama and the sadness and everything unfolds organically rather than feels like pushed on us.
Totally. Yes. And I think one of the great examples for her of just her abilities with the children is when she has this really lovely scene with her daughter, where her daughter's like asking about the idea of like sex and like, what is making love? What is that all about? And rather than her reacting out of like embarrassment or anger or whatever, she just kind of sits down with her and is just describing what it means to be with another person, like with another body, and how special that is, and sort of talking about like the emotional response to it rather than like the act itself, and how like that extends to like your love of another person. And that's something that could come across as very corny or like very schmaltzy, but like there's such a empathy again in her knowing just how this person would communicate a sort of life lesson to her daughter,
Yeah, it's the honesty of it is just so refreshing.
Yeah.
It's very real. It's not like there's, trying to shame her for asking about it or talk about it. It is just so honest.
You know that meme where it's like, I would come out to her? That's, for me, like, that's Jane Alexander in Testament, because I feel like we would have such a beautiful conversation and she would be like, I understand.
Well, yes, and had not everything that happened, one of those boys definitely would have. So I feel that in my bones.
Yes.
Probably Lucas Haas, little stage actor that he is in the movie.
That's true. Yeah.
Now I'm thinking about the school continuing and putting on the play.
Yeah.
After all of this, and that was for me one of the most devastating moments of the whole movie. It is, I mean, it's working on a very high key metaphor level, but it is a last ditch attempt at any type of normalcy that this town is ever going to have again. And the audience crying because they know that too. Know.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'm just thinking about it, and it's such a moment.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
They don't put too fine a point on what this is representing. And like, okay, we need to have a scene where we sit down and agree that we should put on the thing for the benefit of everyone. It just happens, and you understand what it means. So again, speaking to the direction, I think it's so smartly told and trusts the audience to understand the effect of this moment. So I also just think that for Jane Alexander, what makes her such a great, like supporting character actress is her strength as a reactor. Like there are so many scenes here where she's just listening to other people, like her son saying that he wants to run away, but he's scared, and like her talking him out of it with that like patience and not condescending or anything. And or even like the couple, one of them being a very young Kevin Costner
and Rebecca De Mornay.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh my God.
That was interesting. But like them saying they want to move away, and her just like having that look of understanding, and like they're going to go out and like try to find some peace somewhere out there. And all she's doing is just listening to them and just like understanding, but she's such an active listener, I find, that like she doesn't have to say much for the other person to feel comforted in a way. And I don't think you can teach that. Just saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, in that moment, she might be thinking, I would love to do that too.
Yes.
But I can't. But that would never come across. Just her Carol as an empathetic person would not reveal that if she was thinking it, because you're right. She is a very active listener. Mm-hmm. And I think Alexander as an actress is as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So then as things continue to develop and get worse, it's just even more tragic to watch. And I think she's like kissing the answering machine, I think, where her husband left this message, because it's like the last real trace of him that she has left, essentially, and she kind of knows that he's probably not coming back. Is so heartbreaking and also understated. That's another scene that could be very heightened, and she just plays it cool. And it's like this series of tragedies that just unfold without the big operatic kind of moments or music even. Like, I think it's what makes it so harrowing to watch, is because it just feels like real life. It feels like you're watching a real, like, almost documentary style film here. And it's like these moments of tragedy that just make you feel like, as dramatic as this sounds, it feels like the universe is indifferent. Right? And like these things are just happening, and there's no like grand justice to anything, no poetic elements at all. And so it's just like they just have to make the best of what's left.
Yeah. And it's whether it's the school play or the very tragic deaths, the build up to them, there's either very little or none, or it's just, very, very subtle in a way that when they happen, it isn't like a gotcha shock, but it also isn't so subtle that you kind of don't know things are
right
going to happen. Oh my God. Putting Lucas Haas in the sink for that. Oh my God.
Yeah. Or we just like dropped into the middle of her on the bed with her daughter, who has also died.
Just absolutely a hard cut to that moment. And it's, I mean, you know how radiation works, and some people will be affected and some won't. And again, to your point, like how COVID was, it's a brilliant parallel to that, of just how you could be, and Silkwood too, as we'll talk about later, how you could be infected and impacted, and how somebody next to you isn't,
right?
Or isn't yet. Yeah, that moment. Oh my God, it's This was a much more powerful on the rewatch. I don't know why, but it definitely was.
Yeah, I think for me, obviously the final scene is quite affecting, but for me, the scene that I find I had the biggest emotional reaction was, like, ironically, a moment of brief happiness and levity, which is when her son puts on All My Loving, the song, and dances with her just to have like this one joyful moment is so bittersweet. And just obviously the lyrics of that are so poignant, and it's just, I almost lost it just watching the two of them just kind of slowly dance together. Just the two of them are left, and it's like, ugh.
Yeah.
Like, at least we have this one moment we can have, and we can share this one dance.
Yeah. And yeah, speaking of trying to like regain some normalcy, and all the kids are really good too. Roxana's all is fantastic. And Lucas Haas, obviously, in his first movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, that kid is great. I've forgotten that he is the kid in Airplane that goes into the cockpit, and I'm just like, this is so bizarre. This is so weird.
I know.
None of there's no precociousness really with any of them, and their performances are really,
I think that helps too. Yeah.
Yeah. They don't feel like they're being fed lines off screen. It feels like they understand what's happening.
Yeah. So really intense stuff, I gotta say. And again, like I don't think we mentioned this, but like only 90 minutes. But the way that it packs such a punch is really remarkable. And all you need is that final beautiful sort of elegy moment that she has at the end, talking about wanting to remember the good and the awful. Yeah, heavy stuff. But I do recommend people watch it because I think it is very emotionally resonant, even 40 years later, or especially 40 years later. So
yeah, no, absolutely. I wouldn't hesitate to recommend it.
Yeah. Well, I will say to Jane, thank you for your work. This is beautiful stuff, very sensitive.
Yeah.
And it's just, again, nice to see this kind of performance being recognized in a category that typically rewards far louder performances and showier performances. I'm glad that there were enough voters who recognized that there's value in this kind of style too.
Yes, because that's pretty much the rest of the performances that we're going to talk about.
Yes. And also, like, Testament barely made any money, so like they kind of had to go out of their way to find her, and I'm glad they did.
Yeah.
Okay, let us get to our next nominee, which also talks about nuclear disaster. Meryl Streep in Silkwood, our defending champion, of course, 2-time Oscar winner by now, getting her 5th Oscar nomination in 6 years. So yeah, Silkwood is Meryl's first time playing a real person. This is based on the life of Karen Silkwood, who was a union activist fighting for safe working conditions at the nuclear facility where she worked. And she died in a suspicious car accident where she was driving to meet a New York Times reporter to blow the whistle on what she had discovered. So this happened in the early 70s, and there were plans to make a film about her story dating back to the mid-70s, with Jane Fonda being the actress that the studios wanted to have play her. Various legal issues happened after this point, and it eventually ended with Mike Nichols directing, and he did not really want Jane Fonda in the role, and ultimately ended up being on Meryl's desk in 1981, and this was before Sophie's Choice had even come out, but he really wanted her. He had seen some of her stage work, and the film goes through Karen Silkwood's life as a factory worker, living with her boyfriend Drew, played by Kurt Russell, and her friend and coworker Dolly, played by Cher. And Karen discovers through her work as a union officer that there are reports being falsified that could put the company and people's lives in danger. So she takes her findings to Washington, after which point her coworkers start to ostracize her, thinking that the company might close down the plant because of this, and then, put their jobs in danger. And she's actually exposed to radiation at one point, which just adds further stress to her life. So let's talk Meryl Streep. I'm sure you have thoughts on Meryl. What is your experience with the great Meryl Streep and her performance here?
This era for Streep is so insane. It's just, it's hard to, I don't know, it's hard to really encapsulate her absolute domination.
It's hard to compare to anyone else,
It really is. 2 wins extremely early, and then a perennial nominee for the rest of her life still. I mean, this is actually right now her longest streak without a nomination is right now. 6 years.
Yikes.
That's yeah, that has not happened. Well, you know, choices. She makes choices. So
well, she is killing out on Only Murders in the Building, to be fair.
She really is, and she'll have that Emmy soon.
Right.
I really love Meryl here. You know, one of the things that is so synonymous with her is her accent work, sometimes for better or for worse, where it's like she can be so overstudied and overcalculated with her accent work that it's just that becomes like the thing that you pull out of it. It's like what accent is she going to do in this, and how good is it going to be, which is such a weird double-edged sword, because she is such a great performer and a great actress, and her focus and her interest in being like, sounding like, and being the person, it sometimes overrides how we see her and how we see any of her performances now, because it's just like, what's she going to sound like? Or is she just going to sound like Meryl Streep, and that's what it is? Yeah. And I think this was early enough in her career that her Karen Silkwood has, you know, her Oklahoma twang, but it kind of like weaves in and out with, you know, hitting certain words. And I think that's one of the keys sometimes for a performer when they're playing somebody, you know, from the South or from whatever it is, Midwest. I mean, because Oklahoma's not the South, it's the Great Plains is the Midwest. And that isn't like hitting every single word with like the hardest, deepest twang you can, because, you know, she did that with Osage County much later.
Yes.
And I think
similar haircut too.
Oh my God, the mullets in this movie, I live for them. But you know, since I'm talking about accents, I think her accent work is here is wonderful. I think it's just a little more freestyle, and less careful. I think that's her sweet spot, when you kind of know you're watching Meryl Streep, but you're also completely like into whoever she's playing. I love this performance. It just feels very free. She has that open shirt boob flash in the movie, which is kind of like a big deal.
Yeah.
Because she does not do that in her career ever. Anytime her character has a nude scene, it's a body double. She just doesn't. And the context of it in this is exactly that freedom, that absolute, just kind of like, it's a quick, spontaneous, careless, like quick flash, and it's funny. And I think if you know, watch Streep throughout her career and you haven't seen Silkwood yet, and you were to watch it like now, it would feel like, oh my God, kind of like shocking and cool and rebellious, and that's kind of what it is, because it was then, and now it still is. I love that moment. I think it may be like her most absolute spontaneous free moment like in her career. It might be, because it's so completely unique. I'm a very big fan of this movie. I love Mike Nichols' direction, and that it took so long for him to make between films. It's so weird. It's funny when you watch earlier work from an actress too, because Karen Silkwood was like 26, 27 at this time. And sometimes, you know, when you've been with a performer as somebody that you watch for
40 years
of their career, you forget that they were a young person. I don't know. Yeah. I sort of had that moment pretty near the beginning. It was like I felt like I was seeing young Meryl Streep for the first time. And then she has the moment at the very end when she gets into her car for the last time, and she's looking at Drew and looks back, and she makes, I think, what is maybe the most quintessential Meryl Streep face and smile that's like ever of all time. And it was like connecting the two worlds for me. It was fascinating. It was fascinating. But to kind of get back to this and to her in this, again, this is a story that in the 70s, it came out at, the height of these kind of stories. China Syndrome and Chernobyl was going to happen in real life 3 years after this. So again, everything that was happening was so very, very real that it often feels like the one of the very best periods of, like I said, ripped from the headlines kind of like moments. I'll have more to say in a little bit on her. I just I love her in this. It's a very top tier performance for me from her.
Yes. Yeah, I think this is fantastic work from Meryl. Definitely for me one of her better nominations. I do think seeing her in blue collar working class mode is interesting because I do think it's not quite as natural as some of her more like refined or like high-minded kind of characters, but you also do see that she has some of that amiable social quality that she's always kind of had, and just like that aura that people have always gravitated to her with. So like scenes of her just like shooting the shit in the break room with her coworkers when she's like working everyone and just sort of chatting people up and joking around and trying to get someone to take her shift. Like they do just flow so naturally for her, even if again the accent work is a little interesting to me, not always landing personally, but I do think like that social ability that she has is very, very there, and that transferring also into her character's union activism and that sense of like really caring for other people. And like for as much as Meryl has always been like the star attraction since her days in college, even in like the theater and like all the way through getting these lead roles, I do think this is a film where camaraderie is necessary, and she really does blend in with this community, especially with Cher and with Kurt Russell. I think they really have a great flow going on between the three of them.
It's a really good trio there, and I do agree. I think Streep's interactions at work are both friendly when she needs to be and cautiously smart, when she has to be super sneaky with information. Like with the whole allergy meds with Craig T. Nelson. It's just like, I mean, it's obviously that moment. It's just a little too convenient, but
sure.
I didn't mind because she's really, really good in that moment.
Yeah. Also, I was reading a bit in the Mike Nichols book this week about her work or his work on Silkwood and his collaboration with Meryl. And there's a lot of emphasis on just how much the two of them had like such a great creative partnership and really, really worked out each scene and like how Karen would move through a scene, like what she would be thinking, just like down to the line, just all this stuff. And I think you can really, really see how much this is such an actor-friendly movie. And obviously Mike Nichols being like one of the ultimate actor directors, with just how much trust he puts in her and Kurt Russell and Cher to just like carry a scene that is total slice of life. Like we're not really moving the plot forward as they say these days, but just like establishing the dynamics of these characters and just like, sharing a laugh when like Cher is bringing home a girl to the house, and just like they can hear from the other room and just like laughing about it to themselves. Just like you can feel the trust, I think, that Mike Nichols is putting into all of them to just give you a sense of like what the environment is here and why certain things happen towards the end that happen. So it's a great, another beautifully paced movie, even if it's taking its time a little more than Testament.
Because I think this is a story that could be, a stage play that takes place almost entirely in that kitchen with those three.
Yeah.
And then, you know, brief jump outs, you know, for the plant. You could have that. And I think that Nichols putting this trio together is I not by mistake and not by accident. He's way too smart for that.
Yeah. By this point, for sure. What I think is just very smart about the film and in Meryl's performance is just the casualness of her behavior at work, sort of like you're saying, like the flashing moments. Like, even though they're at a nuclear factory, like how she very briefly is like motioning at the radiation detector in this way that's like, oh, this is just my duty to I have to do this, even though it's like, who cares, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
Or like her celebrating her coworker's birthday at work kind of like covertly and just like delighting in the fun of that, even though they're like supposed to be late on a certain task or something. And it's just like how easy it is to be a little careless in certain situations like that, especially when it's your everyday routine. And I think the film and she does a great job of just being very casual and spontaneous and in the moment. Again, spontaneous is not always something you would say with Meryl Streep because of how much she considers her work, but she doesn't indicate, and the film doesn't indicate in a heavy-handed way about what's to come, which is like real life.
Yeah, she's pretty reckless as Karen Silkwood. She's really reckless in context with where they are and what they're doing. The blowing of the bubble gum is just such a funny moment at the beginning too, because popping on her face, and she needs to have a very young David Strathairn take it off. He is really gorgeous in this, and that hair, oh my god.
Oh yeah, he's always had it.
Always, just yeah,
still does.
But yeah, that's, I mean, it's again, it's one of the things that makes this such a top tier Streep performance for me, is that Karen Silkwood is pretty reckless, and Streep is pretty, maybe reckless isn't the right word for it, but she's just, it is more a spontaneous performance.
She's loosey-goosey.
When she's doing that, when it's in a little more serious mode, and and you know, union mode and DC mode, it's, you know, you get a pretty traditional Streep performance out of that. Her mode changes, which is kind of how it should be, because her character does. Her character is more serious because she has to reveal this huge conspiracy.
Yeah, well, we can talk about that. Like her going to Washington, she's out of her element now, so she's definitely a little more formal and serious. It is interesting to see her, because considering up to this point we have seen her as the kind of reckless kind of character, her being a little intimidated and vulnerable, but for me not like completely changing her character necessarily. Like she still has that same assertive quality that she's always had, and as those conversations go forward, feeling more and more comfortable and emboldened to open up. And I think the scene where she is quietly sort of opening up about the company doctoring the x-rays and like touching them up to cover up the defects is so good, and her just like wanting to deliver this message to them, but like not really knowing how they're gonna receive that, like what are the next steps. And I think her hesitance there is really well played, especially when they make it clear that like millions of people could die if what you're saying is true. And just like her kind of like taking all of that in very subtly, I think is really good work from her.
Because at that point, what she has revealed to them isn't enough, and there's really like not much that they can do with it. So it's not so much that she was kind of like sitting on this like last bit of information, but she's definitely going through the motions of, okay, nothing's going to happen if I don't talk about this. And the way that she kind of reveals it isn't like a, oh, but wait, there's more. But it's
and
a
here's
little
my
bit
big moment. Mic
exactly.
Drop. Yes.
it's a little sheepish, which is kind of neat, just how she reveals that. And again, it's Streep being methodical, but you're not really seeing it kind of the way that you do later in some of her career choices.
Yeah, it's methodical, but you're not mad at it.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, you understand what's going on there. So then, obviously, after that, her life really starts to change. Obviously, the Kurt Russell character, Drew, can't really take the fact that she is so invested in this fight and this fight to protect her coworkers. Basically, that's what it comes down to. Plus, there is an implication that she may have fooled around with a guy in Washington, and of course that causes a tizzy, and for him to leave her briefly, and she's kind of upset about it, but like on some level she understands what he says when he says like that she's two people now and he's only in love with one of them. But
when they're watching the thing together and the pictures of her and Ron Silver,
yeah.
Ooh, just again the look on Streep's face, because she knows that regardless of anything happening or not, she knows how it looks. Those eyes are burning in the back of her head from Kurt Russell, and I love that moment. I love that moment so much.
So good. But it leads to this, I think, very mature sort of mutual decision to separate for a little bit, which feels like very handled like adults. And again, it's like this quiet slice of life kind of feeling that makes so much of the film that could be so overly dramatic in an obvious way feel like something that could happen in your own life. Like, it's really well done. Same thing with the scene with her and Dolly on the porch. I think that's really sweet and earned, especially after they've both kind of accused each other of like pushing people away and everything. And it's like this sort of clean slate moment for them after they've had so much tension built up, and just her being like that sort of, you know, like a rock for Dolly, and like singing to her again. Like, there's such a sensitivity, I think, in her work here when you sort of are looking below like the toughness of who Karen Silkwood is and how she carries herself. You see that she is someone who deeply cares about people.
Yeah, it's I love the scene on the porch with Streep and Cher very much, and I know it's like the scene that kind of gets pulled out more than any like if there's ever a clip show or whatever, and it's valid because it is a beautiful moment, because it does, you know, begin, you know, with Cher at the door talking about being a big old dyke, and just the way she says that is so funny. Yet that is never an issue, like at all. It's never a conversation that they have to have. It just is what it is, and they are still close. That's crazy for like 1983. That's crazy for 2023.
Yeah,
it just is, and it's a great moment, and it completely transcends anything and is only about their friendship.
Yeah, really beautiful, sensitive work from both of them and in Mike Nichols' direction. And really from there, it's just fascinating to see her trying to navigate like the social connections that she used to have, and how the general sentiment of her coworkers is that she is just this disruptor at this point, and like their livelihood is threatened, and that she's meddling too much. I almost want to do like a network thing there, that we were meddling with the primal forces of nature, Karen Silkwood.
And it literally would, because then the plant was shut down a year later, so they all lost their jobs.
Well, yes. But still, it's interesting like watching her try to sort of reckon with that and how much it kind of rattles her. But she tries not to let it show. She's trying to do her thing, but obviously she's so on edge now that she has to be like this covert undercover reporter for the union and everything. Like, that's really good tense work, especially compared to the spontaneity and the looseness of the beginning. So yeah, she gets to explore a lot of range here.
Yeah, there is that moment where she does, you know, walk back in and everyone's totally avoiding her and not talking to her. She has such an immature playfulness that is totally inappropriate, and she knows that it is. again, that's absolutely Streep subtlety in that moment, where her character knows exactly what she's doing and knows that it's not the right approach, but does it anyway. I don't know. Yeah. It's a great moment. It's a great moment.
Yeah. Really, really beautiful work. I think the final scene, to go back to that, is so well done, and it's not too artificial compared to the kind of movie we've been watching up to that point, where it kind of could be maybe in a different director's hands, but there is that just sense of like impending doom almost that you feel there, and that final look into the car mirror is so memorable in her realizing what is happening. And there's some light ambiguity in that at first, but then it's kind of obvious what's happened, I think. But yeah, what's your take on the final section here?
I love it, but something we haven't talked about yet, and this moment brings it full circle, and that is Streep's rendition of Amazing Grace, which is early in the film and absolutely gorgeous, and then it's reprised in this moment. And it's certainly kind of like one of those moments where it could feel very forced and artificial,
heavy-handed,
and heavy-handed, as songs in a movie moment that are trying to italicize, bold, and underline the moment. It doesn't really do that. It's just a beautiful, beautiful, sad rendition of the song, and I just think its reprisal is wonderful. Yes. It is an interesting moment, as we discussed a little bit, or I mentioned early, that there was a lot of controversy around how this story could be told, and some pushback from family members and real life people and all of that, including this exact moment where in a different cut was more heavily implied that the car behind her was following her from the beginning, and that this was a forced event. And they already and we have to talk about that this was written by Nora Ephron, and maybe like one of her best scripts ever. I think the combination of Nora Ephron and Mike Nichols together is incredible.
That's
absolutely amazing.
Yes.
Oh my God. But yeah, her car accident is foreshadowed very early, when she already has like a fender bender with it. So it is a very careful and an intentional ending, because you could get in a lot of trouble if you are implying that somebody murdered somebody, because these are all real people, real names, real
and
company
not
names.
That long ago.
And not that long ago. Everything's real. So you have to be really, really careful about very litigious people and companies. So there is a moment that when she leaves the union meeting, the car that follows her is already there and follows her from that point. But that's not in the final edit. But the implication is so there. I mean, lights come on, she's looking back, cut to car crash. You don't get really much more explicit than that. It's pretty clear. But it's a powerful moment. It's a powerful end. But like the real end with Amazing Grace and coming back to her driving away from the house is when you get that Streep look, that face, when she looks back at Drew for the last time. It is perfect.
Yeah, beautiful choice there. Yeah, really, really powerful movie. We haven't even talked about like the Silkwood showers, but that's obviously so much, is like those scenes are so wrenching for many reasons. Just the looks on like the skin is something to behold there. But
it's funny because a Silkwood shower became part of like vernacular.
Yeah.
And you knew exactly what it meant. It was so weird. Yeah. Those showers are really scary. Oh, that poor old gal.
I know.
And her wig just sitting right there on the table.
Yeah. And that's poor another beautiful thing where Meryl, the look on her face watching her is so beautiful, so sensitive. So anyway, great Meryl performance. Really, really good stuff. And let's move on to her Mamma Mia co-star, Julie Walters, in Educating Rita. So, yeah, we have a dame to talk about now. Dame Julie Walters, born in Birmingham, England. She originally went into nursing, but she decided to change career paths and pursued acting at the Manchester Polytechnic School of Theatre and the Everyman Theatre Company. She did some comedy work on TV, and she also starred in the stage version of Educating Rita in 1980, which this is obviously based on. But Educating Rita is actually her feature film debut, which I sometimes forget just because of how, like, fully formed she kind of feels already in this role. But after the success of that, there was naturally a film adaptation in the works after the theater production, I should say. And the director, Lewis Gilbert, says that the studio actually wanted Dolly Parton to play this role. That would have been interesting. Wow. They would have to make some changes, probably, but...
Indeed.
Yeah. But anyway, I guess because Michael Caine was already attached to play the co-lead here, they were like, okay, we can have a lesser-known actress playing Rita. So Educating Rita is about a woman named Susan, played by Julie, who decides to go by Rita, a working class hairdresser who decides she wants to pursue an education and go to Open University in literature. So she meets her tutor, Frank, played by Michael Caine, who's obviously more of a sophisticate, and he's a bit dismissive of her at first, but she is persistent. And the film is kind of just like this My Fair Lady Pygmalion kind of arc of him educating her in literature, while she also has to deal with her husband, who's not very encouraging of her. So let's talk Dame Julie Walters, what you think of her, continued career all these years later, and then her debut performance.
I love Julie Walters. I love her in Mamma Mia, obviously. And Billy Elliot, and in general, I think she's wonderful. This rewatch was interesting. Let's just talk about her for a moment. Let's just talk about her, because that's the good stuff,
right?
That's the good stuff.
Yeah,
I love her in this so much. She has a Judy Holliday meets Julieta Messina energy, especially at the beginning of this, obviously.
Yes.
That is so infectious and so perfect. It is a weird thing where, even though it's her film debut, I was kind of going through my head, like, okay, what other British actress in 1983 would I maybe kind of like want to see here or could do this? And at least for the comedic stuff, for the first third half of it, I wouldn't want to see anyone else do this. I think she is absolutely perfect. I love her. I love her hair. I love her costumes. I love her pencil skirts. It's kind of one of my favorite types of comedic performances, which is, yes, heavily dependent on one-liners and comebacks, which she is full of here. But she's also, like Judy Holliday, she's playing someone who is on the surface stupid. You think she's stupid because she looks a certain way, because she has a certain job. And even though she's a hairdresser, she could easily also be a call girl. It totally has call girl vibes. And that's kind of where I was getting like Julieta Messina too in this. But as a character and as a performance, Walters is constantly playing a very delicate game of showing that she's actually smart, but not maybe not in a way that is too like wink wink. I think it happens later. I think the first half of this is just a considerably better movie and better performance from her than the second half. Yeah, I think it is a very smart and fun and energetic performance. I really love her in the first half. Yeah, I feel like that's going to be kind of the footnote for all of this. Yeah, I love her. I love her in this.
Yeah. Julie Walters is such a fun actress. Just one of those actresses who always looks like she's just having the time of her life. Definitely for me, grew up with the Harry Potter franchise, of course, where she is one of the highlights, I think, as Molly Weasley. Her other Oscar nomination for Billy Elliot is fantastic. Mamma Mia, Brooklyn, even Paddington. Like, she just has so many great films just in general in her filmography, and she's always such a scene stealer. And yeah, she's great here, especially for this being her first film. Yes, I will agree that this is a movie that, of the four we're talking about today, I definitely like the least. The whole, like, Pygmalion concept in general is always hit or miss for me, to be honest. I don't think it's as clever as it wants to be. I think the ending is not really landing in a way that's super effective to me for what it's going for. The supporting characters are pretty pointless to me, but regardless of any of that, very few of the flaws have to do with Julie Walters. You know, I think she infuses so much warmth, so much personality into this character. The first scene, even, like when she's just clomping around in her high heels across the campus, looking lost as hell, and then her first line of dialogue is this like very frank way of telling him to fix his door handle, and she has that thick Liverpool British accent.
I love that accent so much.
Yeah, and absolutely for me too, reminds me of Judy Holliday and the energy she brought in Born Yesterday, just the broadness of it, the loudness, literally, and the personality. It's a very standard sort of stereotype of like working class woman who is street smart but not book smart, and her intentions are good, heart of gold, all that stuff. But I think she has this way of getting past all of that and like getting through all that exposition dump in the beginning because of her very unique way of delivering this, like her speech patterns, the speed of how she's saying these things, and her saying like she wants to learn more than settle down and have babies, and she gets all these little asides. One that I happen to love is when she's like, Howard's End sounds filthy, doesn't it? And she has like this cheeky little smile.
The Howard's End slander in this is one of the funniest things ever.
Yeah,
it's so bizarre but so funny.
Yes. And again, like, it's pretty broad stuff, but I don't know, there's just also like this eagerness in the way she carries herself, and like a rooting factor you have with her, especially when she's like very persistent with him, that you're like, yeah, you should fight for yourself. Like when she's another one I love is when she's looking him up and down and like commenting on his hairstyle, and her being like, I suppose you want to go around looking like that, and he's like, looking like what? And she's like, a geriatric hippie.
She's so not funny. Wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, but like not playing it in a way that's like dumb or like oblivious to what's happening around her. Like she kind of knows that she has kind of a effect when she says certain things, and it establishes that she is sharp and like she has a good head on her shoulders. So I agree, she has a good balancing act here in the beginning.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it is sort of, yeah, a no filter character that, you know, is saying the wrong things in the wrong environment kind of stuff, which is a pretty classic trope. And yeah, there is My Fair Lady Pygmalion-esque things here, but I mean, one of the greatest failures of this is how completely unrealized all of that is. Like the entire setup, the entire movie basically fails on its setup pretty spectacularly.
Yeah.
Because it can't decide actually what their relationship is and what it's going to be. And I think it probably thinks that it's pretty revolutionary that, you know, that they don't end up together and it's not really about that. I'm like, that's fine. That's totally great that that's how you know, want to end this. But the path to get there is so weirdly dull. It's unfocused, because I never feel that there is what exactly their relationship is supposed to be and going to be, like right from the beginning. You just don't feel like that there's going to, maybe be an eventual student teacher relationship, or it never gels. It's really inconsistent, and it is not helped by the absolutely horrific electronic score that never, boy, talk about fucking dating your movie. This synthesizer score, which would be great if it was like a Giorgio Moroder track in a disco. Totally awesome. I'd love it. Give me the remix. It is horrible here. Every time it comes on, it's awful. I hated every single second of the score, and it destroys any moment that is trying to either be serious, like, leaving the note on the car window because she doesn't want to go to the party. It's emphasized by this synthesizer that just is so out of place and bizarre. I absolutely hated it. And that is not something that I remembered from seeing it 40 years ago. So when it comes on, I was like, oh, shit. Okay.
Yeah. Ugh. Not to paint a broad brush, but I do think some things like that do instantly date things when it comes to comedies, especially. I don't know what it is, but like same thing has happened with me in 60s British comedies that I had to watch for this show. It just, the clunky music is just, it takes me out of it every time. And I agree on this one, especially. Again, like the film around her is definitely not up to snuff compared to what she is putting in. So that is unfortunate that we have, once again, one of those in this lineup that otherwise I think is stellar. But we could talk a little bit also about the more serious moments that she has, because she obviously nails so much of the comedy. That's just like in her blood, Julie Walters' fundamental comedic energy. I do think she does a pretty solid job with the more dramatic stuff, like when her husband is very unsupportive of her pursuing this education, so he ends up like burning up all the books that Michael Caine's given her, and she's devastated naturally. But I love how she kind of plays the scene where she comes clean to Michael Caine about all this afterwards, and it's not like she's kind of like a weepy mess kind of thing. Like she's angry and she's embarrassed, like she feels like she let him down almost, even though it's not her fault by any means. And like even her face, like you could see the embarrassment there. And I feel like in other movies with this kind of setup, you're thinking of a character like Rita as the helpless one and a little passive or dumb or whatever it is. But I do think she does give the character a complexity and a respect, even within the very broad framework of this film, while still maintaining the comedic tone.
Yeah, I don't fault her dramatic work in this at all. I think it's fantastic. It's the movie that fails her, and it's the script that fails her, and you can't really go much further with just a flat script, and it's just really flat. It just doesn't. It's weird. I don't know why. I don't know why it is, because if you're gonna tell a pretty classically worn story like this, a Pygmalion type of story, it has to be really good. It can't be mediocre.
It should be sharp,
Yeah, and it needs to be sharp all the time, because we have plenty of examples of ones that are. So it has to be that. I think she is doing the absolute best with what she has, because she's actually pretty unrealized as a character in the setup too. I don't think, I think she's fantastic and funny and bright and all these things, but she's carrying all of it with just that performance and that level of energy, because we see her for 5 seconds in the salon. I think I would have liked a little bit of knowing her first, or seeing her more in an environment that was something other than the school or at home.
Totally.
Because you don't really see that, so you don't get you're missing a chapter on her that I think is really crucial to the growth, because the growth just kind of happens because it's just expected to, so it just does. Not that she
kind of
has to
happens
have
off screen for me.
Exactly.
Right?
It doesn't
Like
it
she
doesn't
goes
need
to
to
this like
be
other summer school thing randomly.
Yeah. She's like, bye, going to France for summer school. See ya.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's like a tiny snippet. It's just, and then you get the moment on the bench where he's like starts to talk about poetry, and she recites that poem off the top of her head, and he's like, oh my God. And like, okay, you're giving us information that we haven't like earned.
Yeah.
She hasn't earned.
Yeah. It's tell not show.
It's
That's what
exactly
it
that.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
This isn't my original idea. I was watching our friend Fritz and his videos that he made on this race, which are really excellent, really in depth. He mentioned something in this section of it that the movie is kind of repetitive. Like, it's kind of the same conversation over and over. And looking back on it, I'm like, yeah, that's probably why it doesn't feel as hard-hitting or in-depth as it could be, or sharp. And it's so overstated for me by the time we get to like the big reconciliation moment towards the end with her and Michael Caine, where she's like really emphasizing over and over again that she's making a choice and she has the opportunity to make choices in her life now because of him, and like because she's following her path also. And I feel like, yeah, I kind of get all that. I feel like I've gotten that from the beginning, and I don't really need it to be explained multiple times. And I don't know, it doesn't ring true for me. And it's hard because I don't want to knock that against her performance, because she's just working with what she has. But that's, by the time I get towards the end, like the performance just becomes less effective to me, because it feels like it's just like the same dynamic scene over and over again.
He's exactly right, because she gives the same speech about what she wants in the opening moments as in the closing.
Yeah.
It's the same, I don't want to have kids, I want to do other things. So we've been watching this for an hour and 45 minutes, and there's actually no arc there whatsoever. Yeah. Because what she wants is the same thing. And he's right. It is the same conversation like 5 or 6 times at these multiple years and stages. So it never feels like it's actually doing anything. But she does get to wear like 6 different wigs, and I do like that.
We love a wig. Yeah,
we love a good wig, and her dramatic wigs. It's like it's such yes. Like, okay, now we know she's serious because she's not a brassy blonde anymore. It's her real color, and it's just flat, and she looks like she could work in a library. It's just like, okay, I'm smart now, so I have to have smart girl hair and no more pencil skirts and all of these things. And it's so rudimentary. What progress means, what intelligence means, what
yeah. And again, I don't think they're parting at the airport moment when she's like, Frank, thanks. I don't know if that really quite lands for me personally, because like, again, it's more so in the writing, but it's just, it doesn't land. I don't feel this deep emotional connection between these two, quite honestly, which I think is like a key fundamental thing you should take away from it, right? This is like a kind of a two-hander type of deal. But on the whole, like, I'm trying as much as I can to separate her performance from that. It's a hell of a debut, and I think she's really cementing her screen persona here really well.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's by the time we get to the end, it's like we don't even know what this relationship is, and whatever. It's like, but she's great. And I mean, and Caine is fine too. Caine is actually pretty fun.
Sure.
But I'm just really focused on her.
Yes. I don't really have much else for this one unless, okay, we can move on.
No.
And this is where it gets a little dicey. We are now at terms of endearment. And the nature of this show dictates that we talk about the losing nominees before we talk about the winner. So Hopefully this will be as smooth as I'm wanting it to be, but hard to separate, obviously. Let's talk about Debra Winger in terms of endearment. So Debra Winger is getting her second consecutive Best Actress nomination right after An Officer and a Gentleman, very in demand at this point in her career, despite some rumors of her being difficult or erratic or all these little adjectives that people like to throw around in the trades. And she is kind of continuing to attract those rumors on the set of Terms, where Shirley MacLaine has claimed certain things about some of Deborah's behavior here, including, and I quote, farting in my face.
So I love that.
Love that for them. So Terms of Endearment is adapted from the Larry McMurtry novel of the same name, and it tells the story of a widowed mother, Aurora, played by Shirley MacLaine, and her only child, Emma, played by Debra Winger, through multiple decades of their close but also sometimes combative relationship. Emma eventually goes off and marries a guy who Aurora doesn't quite approve of, and they move to Iowa. Aurora stays in Houston, and Aurora is getting into a relationship with her neighbor Garrett, an astronaut. But with Emma's storyline, her husband, Flap, great name, he's basically working all the time, and she's raising the 3 kids. She suspects he's having an affair, and that leads to her taking the kids and driving back to Texas. After which, things take an unfortunate turn for Emma when she receives a medical diagnosis. So let's talk broadly. We can just do an establishing Terms of Endearment, your relationship with this movie. You know, also this is our Best Picture winner of the year. Your relationship with Debra Winger, wherever you want to start.
Yeah. So as I mentioned at the top of this, I definitely had a very personal connection with this and with Winger, as you know, I kind of was seeing my mother and grandmother's relationship mirrored in this, and then Winger's oldest son in this was absolutely me. So it's something that I definitely gravitated to when I was younger, and I think it might be, I don't know if I can ever honestly pinpoint like a moment of like, oh, here is where I discovered actressing and all that. And I mentioned earlier, but this might be the moment. It might be this movie, and it might be Winger, because I did see so much of my mother in her, like to an uncomfortable degree. And so I think that was just kind of like I don't know. It was a weird moment where I was making a connection between seeing a movie and feeling like it was a person that I knew, which, you know, I don't know, when you're younger, you're not really doing that so much. You are kind of watching things for entertainment value, but you know, I watched everything with my mother. We watched Oscar movies that before the show every year. That was like our thing. So I definitely feel like this was a very formative movie for me, just for my emotional growth and just what I felt movies could do and could be, and what my connection to them could be. And I think Winger is absolutely phenomenal here. I'm just going to try and keep it as focused on Winger as possible, and
yeah,
and not,
I know it's
not so much on MacLaine. It's a very interesting thing in retrospect, looking at Winger's career, how she was viewed by the industry and labeled as such a troublemaker, because she was, you know, in movies prior to this as well. It was a reputation, and one that when it befalls an actress is much more unkind than an actor. You know, she had a horrible accident when she was younger. She was addicted to cocaine. She had a lot of things happening, you know, that were impacting her work. And whatever all of those things were, they didn't negatively impact the final outcome. I think she was able to either transcend that, or at least James Brooks was able to get her there. But There's something about Winger, just her voice, that raspiness, that laugh. I am so obsessed with her laugh. It made her so unique for this period because she was just kind of very every woman. It's incredible how many things she like turned down and or wasn't in or passed on or was passed up for, because I think she could have had a very, very different career than what she ended up having. But I think her Emma is, I'd be hard pressed to say that it isn't my favorite of hers. It would be crazy for me to feel anything else, I think, or say anything else. And that's, that's me being unable to, disconnect personal feelings from, so that's, that's on me. But I think it just is, it's so real. I think every interaction she has with her kids, I think every desperate moment with her mother, it's just it's very real. And it's a very, kind of not highbrow, but it's a movie that is not steeped in realness. It's not raw, it's not gritty, it's not a Cassavetes movie. This isn't, Jenna Rollins or something.
Yeah.
But she's doing something that feels more authentic than kind of the prettiness of the movie.
Yeah,
I guess.
I agree.
And I love it. This is one of my favorite, like, best picture winners of all time. One of my favorite movies of all time. Period. And speaking of scores, all timer, one of the very best. I could start weeping just listening to the beginning of it. But yeah, I think Winger is amazing here. I can't believe she was able to get out what she was able to with everything behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. She never overplays the 100 scenes that could have been overplayed.
Yeah, this is incredible work from Debra Winger. I think she is so perfectly cast, first of all, so well suited for this role. She had an interview from around that time where she said, it was very important for me to make a hero of this class of woman, which is like American middle class women and the kind of like everyday problems they face. And I think the implication there being like it was important for her to honor like their struggles and having, their struggles being just as valid as the kinds of other characters we see more often in film and their struggles. And I think she fully nails that. And she nails the complexities and all the messiness of Emma, how stubborn she can be at times, and also just like that down to earth, like earthiness. Shirley MacLaine nailed it right on the head when she, in her acceptance speech, said the turbulent brilliance of Debra Winger. Like, that is what this character is, and that is what this performance is. And like, just like we talked about last week with An Officer and a Gentleman, she's so instinctual as an actress and appears to be very unstudied and natural in her approach. And I do think that spontaneity, not always doing the expected thing, is what makes her so compelling to watch. And also, like, yeah, she has such a commanding force just in her voice, in her presence, in her comfortableness on screen, even though she's so young at this point, that it's almost like her and Shirley do feel equally matched. And like, she's going up against a screen legend at this point. And I feel like that's not every younger actress of Debra Winger's age could do that.
Yeah, and
so
I mean, she's going up against a performer that pretty much has all of like the really, really good one-liners and comebacks.
Yeah.
I mean, they all kind of go in MacLaine's favor there, almost across the board. So Winger isn't the beneficiary of being able to kind of deliver exactly that kind of humorous punch. So it's embedded in the performance. She has the dramatic ones, that's for sure.
Lord knows.
Yeah. My God.
Oof.
But I think it is, yeah, sometimes from as a bystander, obviously, when I read about or hear about behind the scenes turmoil and extra drama, I'm like, from my perspective, it was worth it because we got some greatness on the other side. Obviously, again, as a bystander, and I was as not a part of it. I'm like, it worked out for me. It worked out for the film, and sometimes things are worth it.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. The tension between these two, I think, is important to the film. So, like, yeah, kind of works that way.
Yeah, but if you don't have the underlying affection that they have to have for each other, like the moment where she goes back home and runs down the driveway and just jumps into Shirley MacLaine's arms, just legs up, just like jumps into her like a child. Love that moment. I love that moment. You can't have the fighting without that.
Yeah, the underlying love. Yeah. She has so many little like idiosyncratic moments that I love. Like, there's one moment super early in the film where Flap calls her his sweet ass gal, and her reaction to that when she's like, "Oh," it's like, this guy is such a doofus. And like, that's exactly the kind of comment that endeared him to her, I think. Yeah, like another one I love is when Aurora is talking to Flap on the phone and they're in bed, and then Emma starts like picking at his skin and it seems like she's like popping a pimple or something, and it's like she has like this minor victory in her expression there that I think is just like so weird and specific. I think the film is full of those like very carefully observed, spontaneous kind of moments, even in the middle of this film that could have a bit of a soap opera kind of like tone to it. I think she just nails so much of the small moments and carrying the full dramatic weight of the film, like you said, compared to Shirley, who gets all those one-liners, gets to really have fun and just like go for it, whereas she has to be the grounding force for everything.
For all of it. The moment at the grocery store when she doesn't have enough money, that exact thing happened with my mother and I and my younger brother. And I behaved exactly the same way and just was humiliated her. And so, you don't have enough money? I like exact words.
Wow.
And then seeing that and, knowing that that was the wrong thing to say is such a it was like an existential moment. But that scene it's amazing. And she's to the interview that you were speaking of, she is trying to imbue this woman with as much respect as she can, and a moment like that is where she kind of needs it the most, and she gives it to her. Obviously John Lithgow gets to come in with the joke and with the funny part, and it is funny, but I am drawn to Winger in that moment because she's taking away at first the things that are hers, the conditioner. She's taking the things that she doesn't need, not the candy until she does, and then putting it back in the horrible clerk that's just like, we're working backwards here. It's just a fascinating moment of the inner workings of somebody who is kind of at the end of their tether, the other side of single motherhood, kind of that we're seeing, and the opposite of educating Rita, where she became a mother and that was her whole identity. I just think of the scene where she's with Patsy's friends at lunch and it's like, what do you do? And it's like, I'm a mom, and they're just like, that is so good for you. Because the 80s were
the condescension.
The 80s were the decade where women were finally, like, literally allowed to break free from husbands and have jobs and livelihoods and purposes of their own. So that moment is is strikingly real, even though it is, also supposed to be broadly comedic too. But it was just such a very, the grocery store scene is just a moment that is so embedded and ingrained in me. It's absolutely imprinted and will be like for my whole life. And even if it wasn't like such a directly personal connection, it is just a moment in the film that I kind of cling to in terms of how much I love Winger in it. I mean, obviously, once we get to the end and those deathbed conversations and other conversations with Flap and with are fantastic, but that is the moment for me that I think Winger understands Emma the most, and just it might be my favorite moment because of that.
Yeah, you can definitely sense the respect that she has for Emma in these moments, especially those difficult moments. And also, I did want to just do an aside with the John Lithgow affair, which I find very interesting because he's like the complete opposite of Flap. Like, he works at the bank, he seems to be very sensitive and thoughtful, and he kind of is unlocking this other side of her in a way that's, she can tell she's a little more soft-spoken in those scenes with him. And I think some of that is just like them sneaking around, but like he seems to ground her in a way that I think she really needs and she seeks comfort in, because she is just kind of not just, but like what else does she have outside of her identity as a mother at a certain point? And so he's kind of unlocking a little bit for her.
I do think though that the affair between them is underrealized.
Yes.
A little bit. It kind of just goes from the grocery store and like the parking lot and then like one, and then suddenly it's like we've been having this affair this whole time. And it needed just like a tiny bit more, not because it had to show us, but it did though. It did need to show us
feels like slightly cut down maybe.
Yeah, a little bit.
Had at first.
A little bit.
Yeah. But really, a lot of the middle portion of the film is where I think Debra really has the more difficult part between the two of them in terms of really carrying that dramatic weight. You know, Shirley's hanging out with Jack Nicholson and getting into hijinks while she has to deal with like her husband and all of his job stuff, and like him proposing that they go to Nebraska where he was offered a job, and her just having to like navigate what it is that she really wants. You know, she likes her life in Iowa at a certain point, some of which is because of that affair with Lithgow. And also, I think she just wants like something, like she wants stability in her life. And I think she does a lot of good, subtle work of conveying this feeling of her being kind of restless and just like desperate to find some peace, even if it's just going to be tough for her to manage. I don't know. It's just like, again, you look at the two performances and they're both doing such different things. But then also you see in certain moments too how Emma is starting to become a little bit of her mother at the same time, and how she is talking to her own kids and whatnot, and having that tough but fair energy, and maybe not even consciously realizing what she's doing, and being a little overprotective in certain moments.
Yeah, I think as a character, if she had lived, she would probably morph closer to some of the more stinging and biting types of comments that Aurora makes to her. I don't think quite the same though, because I think the relationship between a mother and a daughter is very, very different than a mother and a son. And so the types of little arrows that she slings at Tommy really are very different than like Aurora saying you're not special enough to overcome a bad marriage, which is so fucking brutal. That whole scene, oh my god, hi, day before your marriage, absolutely. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's a fatality. It is so brutal. It's so brutal.
That is a read.
And it is, and not totally inaccurate, but that's why a read is a read. So I think what she has with her sons is a little different, but I think a lot of times any parent will feel like they never want to repeat the mistakes of their parents, but it's the cycle is almost inevitable, and there is very little that you can do to avoid it or a part of it. So I think as the boys would get older, and specifically Tommy, their relationship would be pretty caustic, more so than it even is, because he is a little dick all the way to the very end. I mean, she has to force a final goodbye kiss out of him because he's just being so obstinate. But she's obstinate. She is stubborn.
Life. Yeah. No, that's true.
They are more alike than Emma and Aurora are alike.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's really, really fascinating stuff. And then on top of that, we have the medical development. She has this routine checkup and finds that she has a cyst that ends up being like malignant and needing to be removed. And that is where I think Debra's performance really kicks up into an even higher gear, obviously. And her going out to lunch with her friend and the city friends and everything, who all have problems of their own. That's a really fun dynamic. And after that, when she talks about her cancer and how like it could very well be fine, that feeling of like her hanging on to this little sliver of hope, I think is so beautifully played with the irony of it all. And then obviously it's clear at a certain point that the treatments aren't working and that her cancer is terminal. And I just think that like her frailty is so raw, and with Debra Winger and her voice, especially her voice cracks.
Oh my God.
Like the level of weakness that she is able to bring across without being like heavy-handed about that. It's so heartbreaking.
Yeah, and even the path that we go through to get from that initial doctor visit to diagnosis to the end isn't obsessed with the medical side of it, and looking at x-rays and appointments and all of these things. It's not about that. It's only about the relationships, and I'm so like thankful and grateful for that, because
me too.
I don't need to see an x-ray of what it is. You can tell me what it is, and then we can just watch them go through it. Not every story can do that really, really well. This most definitely does. I mean, Larry McMurtry is kind of amazing. Yeah, so it just then only becomes about what's happening and the performances. And this is watching the energy deflate from Winger is so heartbreaking. And that voice crack. Oh God. I could just get emotional thinking about it.
Yes, and the scene happens where I just lose it, of her talking to her kids and saying goodbye to them, and the empathy that she has for both of them, and knowing exactly how to talk to each one of her boys, because she knows them so well. Obviously, she's their mother, and she knows that Tommy is going to be very obstinate about this whole thing, and he has the body language of not even wanting to approach her. She knows what to say to him to make him feel at peace with the whole thing. And just the selflessness that she has in that moment, I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. Like, it's just so, it instantly makes me tear up just thinking about it. I'm not even watching it, and I'm still just, I could see it so clearly in my mind, all the choices she makes. It's some of the best work that I've seen in this category from one single scene.
I love a good deathbed moment,
Mm-hmm.
and this is an all-timer.
Yeah.
She has the line to Tommy though that sort of is trying to cut through his bravado,
Yeah.
uh, where she says, "You don't even know how much you're going to miss me," and it is. Oh, I use the word careful a lot. I've been using it a lot in this, and but it's the only like best way I can really describe it, because it is cutting him to the quick in that moment, and it's not to make him feel guilty, although it clearly would. It's just trying to get him to the next place, because I think she knows in that moment that he's not going to get there in that room,
Yeah.
and it will have to be later, and it
Mm-hmm.
might be much later. Oh God. Yeah, that's it'd be hard pressed to think of something that is quite so devastating.
Just that final moment where she's telling him that, like, you realize that you love me, but like you're you're gonna think that you might regret not saying it, but like I know that you do. And so like don't beat yourself up about it. It's beautiful. Like that's just like incredible writing on top of everything else.
She's protecting him like to the very last moment, and it
Yeah,
is
which a
phenomenal.
good mother would do. Yeah.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
And even before we dip into MacLaine,
Mm-hmm.
the very last moment between them,
God. Yeah, that look that they
that wave,
exchange.
that
Mm-hmm.
wave, she,
Mm-hmm.
uh, Kevin, my goodness, where's the Kleenex? I'm like losing it over here.
I know.
That is, again, nothing is overplayed. No
Yeah, and
moment
that
is
very well
overplayed,
could be. Yeah.
and it's so quick. Oh,
Yeah.
jeez,
That
good
release.
lord.
Yeah. I know. Mm-hmm.
Debra Winger, what are you doing?
Mm. Debra Winger did the thing. If anyone
She
did the
did.
thing, she did.
She did it. She really did
Yeah.
it.
So a very, very special performance. I
Yeah.
think we can both agree on that. I think we can transition over and talk about our winner from the same movie, Shirley MacLaine, Terms of Endearment. Here we go. Okay, maybe this will lighten things up a little. Who knows?
I think we did an amazing job of
No.
avoiding MacLaine that.
Yeah,
I am very impressed
that
with
went
them.
very well. So good job, us. Yes. Shirley MacLaine, here we go. Finally getting her Oscar after 4 losses. I feel like the last time we had this kind of like overdue kind of narrative in this category, it was probably like Susan Hayward, which was ironically the same year of Shirley's first nomination in 1958. So love that symmetry. We
Mm-hmm.
last talked about her with The Turning Point, another double nominated film in Best Actress, but one where I do think she takes a bit of a backseat to Anne Bancroft. But here, gets to do quite a bit more. But she only makes a handful of movies between that and Terms of Endearment, including Being There. But she's really continuing to have this very strong career, the kind of career that a lot of actresses of her generation weren't always afforded. What I didn't mention in the Debra segment is that this film adaptation originally was supposed to be with Jennifer Jones, who I talked about way back in the 40s. And I think this would have been, quite a comeback, but James L. Brooks decided to go in a different direction. And eventually did go to Shirley because James L. Brooks actually said she was the only one who ever saw it as a comedy.
Yep.
So, I already did the description for the movie, so let's just dive deeper into Shirley's performance here and her side of this story, and what we just think of Shirley overall.
So very much the opposite of Winger in so many ways.
Yeah.
I mean, really, until we get kind of to the end. It is one of my favorite comedic performances of all time. It's right from the get-go in that cold open pre-credits.
Well, it's crib death.
Yep. It's so goddamn funny. And then pinching her. And it's like, it's the setup for the entire movie in seconds. And MacLaine is so absolutely flawless in her delivery at every single moment. Like I said, she gets really all the jokes, everything. And it's because she is a perfect comedian. And Brooks was absolutely right. It had to be played that way. I think it's fascinating that MacLaine's kind of the idea of her win was a finally kind of moment, even though it wasn't like she hadn't been nominated for like almost 10 years before that. And her nominations were pretty spaced out. So it felt maybe a little more like right time, like unavoidable. This is the performance. And I'm glad that it was for this. She has such a sharpness with Aurora, despite the fact that everything about her physical appearance is so extremely feminine. Pastels and chiffons and ruffles and big hair, and everything about her is so very almost like a grown-up doll. Like the dress that she wears when she goes out with Jack Nicholson looks like a doll's dress.
I love that.
And the extra hair that she has, it's so weird. It's such an Arrested Development adult moment that she's having in that moment. And I just don't think she ever misplays any of it. I know we'll definitely talk about, the big hospital, give my doctor the shot moment later, which I had a very different perspective of this watch than I had before. And we'll talk about it later.
Interesting.
I just, I feel like I'm not saying enough about her because I just think she is so goddamn funny in this.
It's like effortless. I think that's the thing.
It's almost like, it's it is, but at the same time, I am watching her not time things to hit the punchline right, but kind of that. Normally I would say that in a really negative way, like watching a dancer count steps to make sure that they know they can hit their mark. And you can see that with actors sometimes when they are delivering comedic lines or they have to hit the punchline. And a lot of that is dependent on the editing, and if the editor can get that moment right. And I feel like she's always a step or two steps ahead of that, of the editor, of even the director. I feel like she knows more than anybody in the movie at any given time. And that's just MacLaine as a performer. I just think I think she is absurdly brilliant here. Embarrassingly so, almost.
I absolutely love this performance. I think this is peak Shirley MacLaine, and I'm just glad that again she got such an opportunity to combine all of her comedic skills, her ability to break your heart, and just like all the emotions in between with material that is so strong, because sometimes that the material doesn't always live up to the brilliance of Shirley. And I will admit that I'm biased when it comes to, I have such a soft spot with like older women characters like this. Like, as strange as this comparison may sound, for some reason I'm thinking of like Frances McDormand and Olive Kitteridge for me, where it's just like following this middle-aged woman who's a little offbeat, a little quirky, smart, witty, sometimes cold and distancing, but just like fully inhabited. And I think just like with Deborah's performance, but still in like pretty different ways, she just creates such a three-dimensional, multifaceted, flawed human being, that you just can't help but to sort of root for, even when she's being stubborn herself. Honestly, sometimes it's like, especially when she's being stubborn, like how much she dislikes Flap and like thinks that, you know, he's not right for Emma. Like her sit down with them that we talked about is so unbelievably awkward, but so funny from her perspective. But also in another scene where she's just like sitting down and it's just her and Emma, and she's expressing her concerns over her marrying him, you can feel like she's trying to go along with this, with what her daughter's doing, but she just can't help herself because she knows her daughter inside and out, so she has to say something. And it's just like that willful quality that she has is so believable. And I think, you know, understandable, because Emma is like her whole world, essentially, and she is an only child. It's like that classic parent-child dynamic where no one can measure up. Like, even if I can insult you and say that, like, you're not something material or whatever, you know, like, she just knows her deep down, and she is going to protect her no matter what. And she has from the literal start.
And also another single mother.
Yeah, right. We love a single mother in 1983.
Yes, very much so. That's like all there was in 83 was the threat of nuclear annihilation and single motherhood.
And the threat of the nuclear family.
Yes, that
against
too.
The nuclear family. Yeah.
My goodness.
Wow. Weird. Yeah. That's the 80s, I guess.
I think so.
Yeah. And also, again, like I keep going back to the scene of her at the dinner table of like the great Shirley MacLaine punchline at the very end where she's like, why should I be happy about being a grandmother?
Just the scream, the exasperated scream of that line, which is also met and matched at the hospital. It's the same tenor, the same delivery, but one is comedic, one is dramatic. She knows the exact difference between the two.
Yep.
And it is
brilliant.
It is so brilliant. It's I kept struggling through all of these rewatches at all of the characters' ages. I was having like some type of existential crisis and meltdown because Streep is like 26 in Silkwood, and Aurora at the beginning, or at not the beginning, is like 41. Because she's having her 50th birthday at that party. And I'm like, hold the fuck on. Wait a minute. You have a very different perception of time and age as you age. So her at 50 in that hadn't registered at all, even in the movie, until that moment. And I was just like, what is happening? You know, when I'm watching this at 12, 50 is the oldest thing in the world. There is no, you have no concept of it. What is 50 when you're 12 years old? So having passed it, I was just like, I feel very attacked right now.
It's just like what we talked about last time with Gloria Swanson in Sunset Boulevard. She's like supposed to be 50 in that.
You know, just put me in the grave. I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm cooked. I am done. Oh my God.
Well, as this movie proves, it's never too late. As we see in the romance with Jack Nicholson. That's my transition.
Perfect.
Yes, as her neighbor. I love her snippy little line to him at the beginning where she's like, imagine you having a date with someone where it wasn't necessarily a felony. It's just so good.
Yeah, again, even a line like that, and a lot of her lines are pretty much like, but bump. A lot of her lines are.
Yeah.
They are made and set up for delivery. And you know, if it was live at like a stage production, there would be like a pause, you know.
Yes.
But it's
pause for laugh track.
Totally. It doesn't matter if it is if it's something sharp or if it's something like that. That's just kind of like she kills it every time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you see how she like doesn't even know exactly why she is kind of drawn to this guy, because like all reason and logic should be like disgusted by this man, and yet something is pulling her to him. Maybe it's that little red robe, as you tweeted about.
Oh my God.
The sluttiest thing a man could do is wear a little red robe.
It is right there. I mean, we are in the era of short shorts, thank goodness.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the short shorts of 83.
It sure was. Showing a lot of skin in this one, Jack.
Yes, he was.
You know, where we go to like a few years after that initial awkward scene and her dealing with her various suitors like Danny DeVito, and she's just like exhausted by them, is so funny. And like her marching over to him and saying like, hey, you should, you know, take me out to lunch, and just like his expression on his face, like that she's making this request years later. Like the audacity of this woman. He's so good in this too. But I love how also she has like this loud exhale as she's sort of like convincing herself that this is happening. And also their awkward lunch date. I cannot get enough of their scenes together.
I love the lunch date, the car, the Corvette.
Driving on the beach.
I mean, obviously the driving on the beach is hilarious, and you know, her clomping through the water to get to him and the hand stuck on her tit is absurd and hilarious.
Which was improvised.
And it looks it, and that's kind of what's great, because the camera didn't know what to do in the moment, and you can see it kind of like moving around, and it's like, is she going to completely fall out of the dress? What is even happening here? It's great. I love that spontaneous moment. But the moment of all of that is the funniest for me is when they get to the restaurant and he comes to that screeching halt, and her getting out of the car is so freaking hilarious. It's like she's wearing like 20-pound weights on her feet. It is such a physical performance. It is such that moment has physical weight to the comedy, and it is absolutely hilarious. I mean, I've seen this. Oh my God! When she takes the piece off, I'm just like,
I know.
Yeah, just go with what you got, girl. Just do it.
Yep.
It's funny because I mean, she brings so much of this energy to Postcards from the Edge, like so much.
Yeah.
It's basically like Aurora Part 2, if we pretend that the Evening Star doesn't exist, and I think we should all do that.
Non-canon.
Absolutely. So it's kind of funny because this is a performance that is so quintessential MacLaine, and it's also the kind that feels like, well, of course she would give this performance. It's easy for her. It's everything that she's doing, and her delivery is absolutely just what we know her to be and what we know that she can do. Yet that never gets in the way in a way that it sometimes can, you know, for other actresses. Streep, can get in the way of herself often. That never happens here for MacLaine, ever. Again, I feel like she is running this entire ship of the movie, the whole thing.
Well, I think she knows that this is like a gift of a part, especially, you know, at her age, at this stage in her career. So she's going to make the most of it, and she is going to captain that ship. So yeah, it's beautiful work. You know, the stuff when Emma drives back home to Texas and they're like giggling together on the bed. I love that scene. And her admitting to her daughter that she didn't know that like sex could be so fan-fucking-tastic. I like, even her laugh is so infectious there. I mean, scenes like that are like very proto Gilmore Girls, like oversharing to her daughter kind of stuff.
Oh my God, you are so right.
I mean, yeah, this is the blueprint. But, you know, she gets a lot of comedy stuff, but then by the end, of course, the more dramatic stuff, the breakup scene with Garrett, I think is such a good scene for her, where she's realizing that, he's losing interest in her because, you know, he feels an obligation to her essentially, and she just like shuts it down and mocks him and like blah 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 blah. That scene is so specific, so Shirley MacLaine, but it's also like she is hurt by that, you know, but she's not gonna let it show because that's not who she is.
Oh, that blah 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 is so good. Mm-hmm. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Because that isn't, again, she understands how to play every single line. And it's funny, but it's not funny. It's not a humorous line. There's something so defeatist about it.
Yes.
And she doesn't have that as a character very much, but she is done in that moment. She is done. She is over. And it's yeah. It's much more, it's as cutting as a lot of the things that she says to Emma or to Flap.
And then, of course, we can definitely revisit this. Obviously, Give My Daughter the Shot, a scene that gives me chills every time, for as much as it's been parodied. Her desperation and her just not knowing how to cope with the fact that these nurses aren't giving her baby the best care that she deserves. You know, it's so wrenching, you know, and it's also a surprisingly quick scene. Like, I forget how quick it is, right? This is not like some drawn out scene.
That
it's like
was
a minute tops.
That was the thing that, even though I have seen this several times, that stood out to me the most, because this is like the scene that the clip that we see the most of this movie is always that. But it is a hard cut to that moment. There is no buildup whatsoever that even that Emma is in pain. Nothing. There is nothing leading up to that moment.
Right.
And it's weird because, you know, I was mentioning earlier how much I love that we weren't seeing a whole bunch of the medical diagnosis and treatments and stuff. We were just seeing the guts, the acting.
Right.
I don't know if this maybe needed a little bit, but but maybe not. It just was, I had not recalled it being so brief and just cut like directly to it.
Yeah. And then cut directly after it too.
Like, bam.
But I'm still effective for me.
Oh, it's fantastic. No, obviously. I love it. It is perfect.
Yeah. Again, like, it's been 40 years. We've seen countless versions of that, including on Gilmore Girls itself. Referenced it. So, like, yeah, it's just that, like, inseparable thing between a mother and a child, especially a mother and an only child. I think that is what makes it especially resonant. And she's so perfect all the way through the end, and that beautiful exchange they have. The deathbed scene between her and her daughter is just a lot. It's a lot. I have to look away. Just she gets it. She understands the tone of each scene and where Aurora needs to be emotionally at each point, and never overplaying it, even when she is having those screaming moments. Obviously those are like over the top, but like, I don't know, she just knows the tone. She understood the assignment.
Yeah, I mean, her and Winger definitely both do, but again, I think MacLaine is tasked with the more complicated of those, because she has to play more comedy, and she has to be really smart about how and when, and it isn't a misstep. And even in her dramatic stuff, I mean, the Give My Daughter the Shot is a big, you know, that's the plate smashing moment. That is the moment. But it's nothing compared to the look on her face when she does know that Emma has died. It is every emotion of sadness, grief, release, every single thing. It is 40 years of a relationship, or 30, however old Emma is. 30 years of a relationship in just a few seconds, and just in the face. I mean, it's she barely She barely really moves. She just looks away to collect it. It's a beautiful moment.
It really is. And you have to also feel like she is going to be okay, even though she will never be over this. I do think she provides, for me, enough resolution personally with the character. And she has that fortitude that she has throughout so much of the film anyway, that you understand she will eventually be able to move forward. And I think that is important maybe for the audience by the end, that life will go on.
Yeah, and also understanding then what, her relationship with her grandchildren is going to be. Those poor kids.
I know. Therapy.
I mean, for real, though.
Yes. Really, really beautiful work from Shirley. Okay, let's get to the Oscar race here. To get to the precursors, Shirley MacLaine won the Golden Globe for drama and almost every critic award there was to win in 1983, including New York, Los Angeles, and National Board of Review. Good haul for her. She absolutely knew she was going to win this going into it. But Debra Winger won the National Society of Film Critics Award because they wanted to be a little different.
I love that win so much.
Yes. Yeah. She was a runner-up at New York. She was a Golden Globe nominee. Julie Walters won the Golden Globe for musical or comedy, and she won at BAFTA. So that's a pretty good haul for her. Meryl Streep was a nominee everywhere, including with critics, but the only thing she won was the Kansas City Film Critics Award, which I don't think had a whole lot of bearing on anything. But Jane Alexander was a Golden Globe nominee and a LA Film Critics nominee, but didn't win anything. Everyone was nominated somewhere, but for the most part, it was just Shirley and a little bit of Julie winning the lion's share of everything.
Yeah.
So let's talk what happened here. How did Shirley MacLaine win this? She finally wins on her 5th nomination. She doesn't have to have the thing of like, oh, vote splitting that people like to throw out of, oh, she's competing with someone who's in the same film. What are people going to do? So she won. So this kind of disproves that is always the case. So what do you think? Why did she win this?
I think she won by being in the Best Picture winner, by being in a film with so many other acting nominations, by being the central force of the film. And I definitely think that there is the element of not career rewarding, but yes, kind of about time kind of thing. Even though, I mean, 4 nominations is a very decent amount. It's not like 6, 7, 8 or more like others have had. So I don't think, and because her previous nomination was so long before that, it didn't feel like there was an urgency exactly to her winning. But Jane Alexander was not going to win. Julie Walters definitely had the precursors that she had, but it's still a different kind of comedic performance than MacLaine was giving, and a debut. Not really much to work with there. Streep just won.
Already has 2.
And it took almost 30 years for her to get her 3rd. So while they were absolutely willing to nominate her every single year, a win just would, I think, have been a step too far. just in voters' minds, because
and probably in her mind too. Like
maybe
not at this time, but
maybe not.
She would feel a certain way.
She definitely would. And Winger, as great as she is, I think the negative attention for her and around her did not do her any favors. Even if I think the race between her and MacLaine was very, very close, or not, but if it hypothetically was very, very close, I think, especially at that time, and honestly even maybe now, that would be enough to keep her from winning. So MacLaine winning was really a pretty easy path, and not because that her competition wasn't strong, because the competition was great. But sometimes when we see what you could call a career win, whether it's like Geraldine Page or Julianne Moore, you can put some pieces together as to why that stand outside of the performance. I don't think you can do that with MacLaine.
Fair point. This is another year where I don't think there was much suspense, obviously. Somehow this just keeps happening now that we've reached the 80s, where like there's just a super obvious frontrunner and they just sort of march to the Oscar. The only time that didn't really happen this decade so far is Katharine Hepburn's final win. But really, like, Sissy Spacek's win, Meryl's win last year, now this, it feels like there's just like a very easy sort of like consolidation early on that feels to me like inherently more, this is a loaded word, but like conservative than it was in the 70s, which was much more chaotic. Like Glenda Jackson winning twice when she wasn't expected to either time. Jane Fonda and Coming Home wasn't really predicted. Even people like Ellen Burstyn wasn't like a guaranteed lock. And now it's like we've just like reached this very traditional Oscar path. I know that's kind of like a tangent, but something to look out for moving forward, perhaps.
Absolutely.
I think she had such a strong narrative of working in this industry for decades, having all kinds of connections and friends, and kind of reaching a bit of like an elder statesman kind of position of respect, plus her character being so inherently likable and complex and comedic and dramatic and like all of these things, plus the film being the best picture winner of the year and like the film that is head and shoulders above any other film of 1983, at least by Oscar standards. And she also made it clear that she wanted it. Like once she got the great reviews and people were speaking so positively about her, she was going around in interviews being like, you know what? My first 4 nominations, I didn't think I deserved it. This time I do. Like, it wasn't just her Oscar speech where she said that at the end.
Yeah.
She was really talking about it. And she would say it in a way that was like, you know, funny and a little bit like ironic, self-deprecating a little. And I think people really like that. And I think the idea of wanting it is always so interesting when it comes to Oscar discussions, because like, sorry to be repetitive for the listeners, but like, I think Glenn Close kind of indicated that it would be nice thing for her to finally win that Oscar in 2018. But for as much as I love Glenn, I don't think she had the same kind of like comedic tone with the whole thing, you know, whereas someone like Jamie Lee Curtis kind of did. And she was in a film that was the Best Picture winner. And so, you know, I think there's a certain line you have to toe with that.
You can't be really sheepish about your desire to win, but it is also a very delicate balance of letting voters know that you really want it, but just shy of like such desperation that it's off-putting. And again, this mostly with regard to actresses, shockingly.
Yes,
so
always. Yeah.
There is a decorum and a level of behavior that is required that is different than like, let's say, Eddie Redmayne and his absolute, I love Eddie Redmayne, but I mean his desire to win when he won was craven.
Craven.
And you know, when an actress does that, it's you know, it's a little
people feel a certain way about it. I know
they feel a certain type of way.
Yeah, I think that's really what it comes down to. There's not a lot of other discussion to be had about it because it was signed, sealed, and delivered for Shirley. But an incredible speech. I watch it a lot. Again, the turbulent brilliance of Debra Winger is so shady in a way that I absolutely adore. And even Deborah's face when she says that, she's like, okay.
And she's like, you know,
she knows at the time.
Yeah, she's like, you know, half of this is yours, but not really, it's mine. It is such an Aurora speech, which is,
it really is
so funny. And it's sort of like, that's kind of like why nobody else could have done this, because there's a lot of Shirley MacLaine in Aurora because we saw it on stage that night.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Yep. And she does deserve this. Thank you.
Yes.
So,
yes.
There you have it. Let's move on to a whole bunch of questions. We got to speed through this because we're running long. I'm not going to read everything, but
there were so many questions.
Yeah. Let's be quick about these answers because we don't want to be here all day.
Right.
Fritz said, "Is this secretly one of the best lineups ever?"
Yes.
Yeah. I feel like I get this question almost every episode now, which is kind of funny, but like, yeah, I think it's kind of great. Maybe not like top 5, but like top 10.
Yeah, not even that secretly, but yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Fritz said, "Which other Best Actress winner should have ended her speech with 'I deserve this'?"
Like of all time?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Kate Winslet.
Oh my God, that makes perfect sense. And yes, we will go with that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Another one from Fritz. If Shirley, he had a lot to say. If Shirley had won earlier, would this have been her second Oscar?
Well, I mean, let's look at which ones we're talking about.
The Apartment.
Yeah.
I assume. I don't know.
I think The Apartment is the most realistic. That would have been 23 years. Yeah. I think she still would have won.
Yeah. They gave Sally Field her second Oscar like the very next year, so I don't think it would be an issue.
Yeah, I think it would have been fine.
Yeah. Joey Gentile said, "If vote splitting is real, parentheses, it's not, how did Shirley beat Debra?"
She got more votes.
That's what Joey would say.
It's like the one thing that Joey and I agree on. Yeah, this, I mean, we kind of just went over it. It seemed like a pretty clear. There's a clear case.
When there is a clear option between the two, then it's not really a thing.
Yeah.
That's how it goes.
I mean, we see it in supporting all the time. We saw it in supporting in this movie.
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah. Greg Creeman said, "Why didn't they split and someone else win?" Same answer. Christoph said, "Given how great everyone in this lineup is, would Shirley have won without an overdue narrative as well?" I still think so. I don't think this was just a legacy win.
No, it is the performance. You can't, there is no argument that it's not. I'm sorry, there just isn't. It's the performance.
Mm-hmm. Christoph also asked, if Terms of Endearment gets released today, who gets campaigned in supporting, Shirley or Debra? That's a very cynical question, but also probably would be the case. Do you think they would really do that? The studio?
Yes, I do. Yeah. And that's something we talked about a little bit offline, actually. The concept of 2 lead performances from the same movie being nominated in the same category, and why it might be confusing to some people.
Yeah, because there was an era when this was allowed. Kids.
Yeah, I think it's. Yeah, I mean, we could just go ahead and mention it then. I think it's some. It is valid to kind of wonder why. Because I think a lot of people that, follow Oscar stuff now, the last time that leads were nominated was quite literally before their lifetime. So they've never seen it. 1991. They've never seen it happen in their lifetime. So the idea of it is really unique and foreign and strange. I certainly wish that it would, but clearly studios and publicists and actors got wind that it wasn't happening anymore for some reason. Absolutely. And there is no like telltale moment or anything that you can kind of really point to. It just stopped happening. Because it stopped happening, people started to stop campaigning as co-leads in the same category.
Yeah. So to answer the question, I think probably Shirley lead, Debra supporting would be my guess.
Without question.
Yeah. Maybe they both would have won. Who knows?
And that might have made for some very entertaining campaigning and commentary.
Yes, for sure. Mm-hmm. Cody Derricks asked that question. If Debra Winger is put in supporting, which would definitely happen today, so Cody agrees, does she easily win?
I thought actually
from supporting of this year when Linda Hunt is winning. She's
Yeah.
very showy and transformational in The Year of Living Dangerously, so maybe that's a fight, but I sort of can't imagine them not just going for Debra there.
I feel like
Right?
yes, but I do think it would have been extremely competitive between the two.
Yeah, for sure.
Because Linda Hunt's win is almost kind of revolutionary, really. And that would have been bypassing that moment. I think it would have been really tougher than maybe we want to think that it would be.
I'm glad things worked out the way they did ultimately. Glenda Miss Jackson If You Nasty Forever said, why was this the end of the road for Shirley? What would you have nominated for after this, and why do you think she missed out on other nominations?
It is funny, and maybe a funny little ironic twist that it's Debra Winger that got a nomination after this, and MacLaine never did.
That's true.
I think there's a little sweet bit of irony to that.
Mm-hmm.
But is in terms of why MacLaine didn't get in after this, I mean, I think it's I don't think you can really say, other than maybe Steel Magnolias, that she just didn't have the material. I think I mean, I don't think Madame Suzatska was like really going to do that, regardless of that bizarre triple Golden Globe win.
Postcards from the Edge for me. That's
Postcards from the Edge is
that didn't happen.
I wonder. I mean, I think both would have been great, but they're both, such high key comedic performances. I think maybe there was too much Aurora in her.
Maybe.
I think maybe. Because I love MacLaine in Postcards. Love her. But I do feel like maybe it could have, some voters would feel like, didn't we kind of do this with Terms?
Yeah.
I would totally would have nominated for this and for Still Magnolias. 100%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If she is in supporting, which I assume she would be.
Yes.
For that.
Yes.
Her and Whoopi Goldberg in Ghost and Diane Ladd in Wild at Heart would be just like an incredible combination. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Alicio Martinez, who says this was MacLaine's fifth and final nomination. How would you rank her acting nominations? So, of course, she gets in for Some Came Running, and then The Apartment, Irma La Douce, The Turning Point, and Terms of Endearment. I'll just do my ranking. This is pretty concrete here. Number 1, Terms of Endearment, going out on top. Number 2, The Apartment. Number 3, Some Came Running. Number 4, The Turning Point. And number 5, Irma La Douce, which is a movie I don't like.
I am in total agreement with you on all accounts.
Great.
Yep. That's exactly what I would do that as well.
Okay. Lila said, imagine a possible season of Ryan Murphy's feud concerning the production of Terms of Endearment. Who do you think could convincingly play Debra and Shirley?
Oh my God. Okay. That's one that I did not go through.
That's okay. That's okay.
I did the recasting of like a lot, but all right. Who could play MacLaine and Winger at, what do we like, 45, 25?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh my God.
I came up with Julianne Nicholson for Shirley MacLaine. Possibly could work.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And then I really struggled with Debra Winger because like that could be like a superstar like Emma Stone or Jennifer Lawrence or any of those kind of, or like Florence Pugh, like that kind of deep husky voice. Somehow I landed on Haley Lou Richardson. I think could maybe work.
That's kind of cool. Emma Stone is my recast for Emma.
Okay, well there you go.
Oh my God. Actually, I mean, maybe my recasts are just the feud versions.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Well, we'll get to that question shortly.
Oh my gosh.
Irvan Pritt said, if Shirley would have won for The Apartment earlier, would this have been Debra Winger's win?
No.
I still don't think so. Sorry to Debra. I just think she would have gotten it for both, like you said.
Yeah.
And then Morgan said, if Shirley and Debra had split the vote as Anne Baxter and Bette Davis did in 1950, which performance would have won? So of the other three.
Oh.
Not Jane Alexander. So one of the other two. Probably
Streep.
Right? Meryl?
Yeah, it would be Streep. Stronger film, more nominations, but vote splitting isn't real, so.
Christoph said, Jane Alexander is so damn good in Testament. Why couldn't they wait for the release until 1984 when she could have won easily? I don't know if she would have won in 1984, but it's a fair point. I think she would have contended better.
Yeah, I think so.
It's just such a subtle performance that I don't know if it's a winning performance for
and it still would have been
Academy.
So it would have been just her as a sole nominee for the film.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would want it another way. I want this lineup. This is a great lineup.
Yeah.
I mean, just how they all are against each other.
Joey Gentili said, Jane Alexander's final nomination so far is probably her strongest. Why was she never given an overdue narrative like Shirley here?
Because she was the sole nominee and not in a movie nominated for 11 Oscars that won Best Picture and doesn't play the game.
That's true. I think just in general, I think people really respected Jane Alexander, but her work was so rarely showy in an obvious way that I think she was never quite able to reach that status of people really taking notice of her being overdue, maybe. She actually kind of fits the bill of the classic supporting win. So it's kind of a shame that she couldn't get another nomination after this, but
yeah.
Andrew Carden said, rank Jane Alexander's 4 Oscar-nominated turns. This is another easy one for me. Testament number 1, Kramer versus Kramer number 2, Great White Hope number 3, All the President's Men number 4. But love them all.
Let me see. I think I might agree. Maybe I might flip All the President's Men and Great White Hope, but no, I don't know.
Yeah.
It kind of, after Testament, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
and Kramer versus Kramer is definitely number 2, so I don't know.
Ben Miller said, Jane Alexander is so freaking good in Testament. Is it so underseen because of the depressing content, or was it lost in the shuffle of apocalypse films? So this is just general, Testament. Why haven't more people seen it?
I was going to say this is these questions. These questions are from the Jane Alexander fan club, and I love it. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, underseen. There also might have been some maybe underlying dislike that it was a TV movie turned into a feature film. There might be something.
Yeah, I could see it.
Something like that. They did have
fatigue over this kind of material, maybe.
I don't know about that. There
was a TV movie the day after.
Well, the day after is a whole nother can of worms of my childhood. My goodness. I think, also this movie did have its own labor issues because in the change from a television movie to a feature film, that's a different pricing structure in terms of how and what you're paid, and that was settled out of court. There might have been some residual feelings about that. There's a lot of little things that could have taken hold, but none of it really matters because MacLaine was just too strong.
Yeah. Well, Juan Carlos Ohano said, Testament was originally going to premiere as a TV film before it was given a theatrical run. Pick a performance from a TV film from any era that you would have rather given a theatrical run in order to be eligible for Best Actress at the Oscars.
Emma Thompson for Wit.
She was on my list as well. There's so many over the years.
There's a lot.
Halle Berry in Introducing Dorothy Dandridge. I know this is slightly controversial, but I would love to have seen an Oscar push for Drew Barrymore in Grey Gardens. I know we feel a certain way about Drew Barrymore now, but
oh no, I totally agree.
Adore that performance.
She should have won the Emmy, so
over Jessica Lange. Sorry.
Yep. Yep. Sorry.
Yeah.
Not sorry at all.
And that was 2009. She would have competed with Sandra Bullock. So who knows what would have happened there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, she wouldn't have won, but it would have been kind of fun.
Yeah. Drew Barrymore on the Oscar campaign trail. Would have been interesting.
Yeah.
Both Dark Shaka and Blood Blue Green said if Meryl lost in 1982, would she win here?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either, actually. It's hard to say, but like she had already won for Kramer versus Kramer, so like she wasn't overdue.
I don't think she was even second here, but
okay, well,
oops, said too much.
This is a very shady question from JPS, who said, if Oscars were given purely on merit, ha ha, would Meryl win this one too?
No.
I would say the voters clearly thought that Shirley was better on merit, so I guess I would say no.
It seems like a lot of these questions think that MacLaine won primarily as a legacy win. I'm a little surprised.
And we're here to dispel that notion.
Yeah, I'm a little disappointed. Let it be known, people. I'm disappointed.
Wow. Eric is very disappointed in you.
I'm not mad at you. I'm just disappointed.
Wow, that hurts even more. Okay, Joey Gentili said, Julie Walters was a woman robbed, and by today's standards of precursors was a solid front runner, winning both Golden Globe and BAFTA. Why ultimately do you think she faltered here? Okay, I'm going to get up on my pulpit here. I understand looking at the stats. Julie Walters, she won Golden Globe, she won BAFTA, therefore she was a front runner. But you have to look at like the competition that she faced in both of those races. She literally did not beat a single one of these other women in either of those categories. Although she technically did beat Meryl Streep, but for Sophie's Choice at BAFTA, which is like, okay, BAFTA. But either way, she won the Comedy Golden Globe. Shirley MacLaine beat the other three nominees here for the Drama Golden Globe. She won multiple Critics Awards. Shirley MacLaine was the front runner. I reject the hypothesis.
Yeah,
with respect, Joey.
It's with total disrespect to you, Joey, because I love you, but girl, no. It is not the same in any way. BAFTA as a precursor did not exist as a precursor until the modern era, like 2000. So pretty much anything before that is easily to discount, but none more than to your point, Kevin, that she didn't compete with anybody. She didn't win against anybody that she lost to at the Oscar. It's not the same. And a Comedy Globe is not the same as a Drama Globe. But no, it's not. BAFTA's not a precursor in 1983.
Yeah. Moving on. Fritz said Julie didn't stay in Hollywood because it didn't know what to do with her. Cast her in a nominated part of the 80s. I'm going to say Working Girl. Yeah. In Melanie Griffith's part.
Okay.
Sure. It would be a different take, but like, seems like it would suit her the best. There's not a lot of more comedies after this that get nominated, so like, that's kind of where I'm leaning.
I'm into that, but I almost want to look at like one of Streep's 21 nominations and like give one to her. Maybe not Sophie's Choice, maybe not French Lieutenant's Woman. But
Out of Africa.
Yeah, I think that might work. I think she could. I think she could have. Oh, this is only 80s.
Yeah. A Cry in the Dark. Let's see her do an Australian accent.
Oh God, that could be something. Oh, she could totally have done Ironweed.
Yeah, right.
She could have done a gnarled little alcoholic with bad teeth. Absolutely,
you said it. Okay, Christoph pointed out that both Meryl Streep and Julie Walters appeared together in Mamma Mia, and then Chelsea asked in the replies, which of the other three nominees here would you cast in the third Mamma Mia film that I wrote? Gotta be Shirley MacLaine, right? Like,
I feel like, yeah.
I don't think Jane Alexander fits the vibe.
Not really in any way. Yeah, it would have to be MacLaine in some type of like, she's playing Cher's mother.
Oh my God.
If they're just gonna keep
this
going,
line of like immortal characters.
If you're gonna make Cher Meryl's mother, then Shirley gets to be Cher's mother. That's just,
I love that.
That's it's a fact. I'm sorry.
That's perfect. Wow. Patrick Ross said, I used to teach teachers and we'd sometimes show Educating Rita in the class. What course would you run any of the other nominated films in? Interesting question. For me, it would be Terms of Endearment, and it would just be like a screenwriting class. Just with how like well written it is, the tonal whiplash isn't really felt, even though there's comedy and drama.
Interesting. What class would I teach one of these movies in?
Yeah, Professor Erik.
Wow.
What would you teach?
I don't know, because it would definitely have to be an actress based class. So correct. I think which they would almost all qualify for as like women of a certain age actresses, but I think that actually might be the course, and it would be women of a certain age in films, and it would be Terms of Endearment, because I think MacLaine outages everybody in their character and in real life. So
Chels said, rank these performances based on hot girl shit. And as she notes, it's a feeling, a vibe, not a physical attribute. Thank you for that clarification. My number one is Shirley MacLaine in Terms of Endearment. She's having fun. She is living on her own terms. That's hot girl shit to me.
Yeah, Shirley MacLaine absolutely would have to be number one. If this was happening now, every Twitter comment would be like, she's serving cunt every single day, boots house down.
She's so mother for this.
Yes. She would be mother for this. quite literally. But yeah, this would be kind of a runaway win, I think, for MacLaine. But Jane Alexander might be a close second, but that would be really more like radiation levels of hot girl shit.
Oh my God.
I know.
What about Meryl Streep? She's setting off the radar.
That is true. She does as well. There is lots of radioactivity going on in this category.
It's a radioactive lineup.
It really is.
Yeah, I mean, like Debra Winger, she's a bit more of a recessive mode, I think, for a lot of the film. Not quite in the hot girl shit type of thing. Julie Walters, kind of like she's taking control of her destiny and whatnot, as she says over and over.
First 30 minutes, yeah, Julie Walters definitely in hot girl mode.
Yeah. Jane Alexander, I don't think has a hot girl energy per se, but I love her either way.
Yeah.
So, moving on. Gabriel said, every time Jack Nicholson wins an Oscar, his female co-star in the same movie wins a Best Actress Oscar. Rank his Best Actress winning co-stars in terms of performances. Louise Fletcher, Shirley MacLaine, Helen Hunt.
This is so easy. I mean, yeah. Especially if you know anything about me. Because it's Shirley MacLaine, Louise Fletcher, and then actually that's it.
Yeah, we need to do a hunt for the other one there. Yeah, Shirley by a mile for me, number one. Louise, number two. I have not seen As Good as It Gets in a hot minute, but like either way would probably be my number three. So we will see on that 97 episode.
Yeah.
Yes. Both Morgan and Rob Montoya want us to recast the nominees with actresses of today. I assume you have a list, so let's get right into it.
I even did actors too, but I don't know why.
God damn.
But just because, some of the dynamics kind of like almost demand it. Right. I'll run through them quick. Okay. For Educating Rita, I would have Olivia Cooke as Rita.
Okay.
Definitely has like the accent down. She could totally like nail that. And for Frank, probably like Daniel Craig.
hot.
Yeah, and then they would actually like smash.
Yes.
Testament's tough because I think Carol is very much in the Amy Adams, Michelle Williams, Samantha Morton vibe. I think I probably would go with Samantha Morton. Maybe.
Yeah, I like that.
And then I cast James McAvoy as the hot priest.
Ooh. Okay.
Silkwood, again, looking at ages and being completely like gobsmacked at like how old people were versus how old I thought they were. It might feel basic, but I think Jennifer Lawrence would be really, really good as Karen. Good. I have Zazie Beetz for Dolly.
Love that.
Aaron Taylor Johnson for Drew.
Okay.
And then sure, I went even I went even extra and have Juno Temple as Angela in the Diana Scarwood role.
That is very accurate, honestly. That's a
that one came together and I was like, oh my god, this is basically like the roles that she plays anyway. The Terms was weird and hard because it also started to feel really almost basic. And I started actually with Emma because I almost was trying to replicate like just Debra Winger's gravelly energy and that laugh. And that's why I went to Emma Stone. And that felt really easy. And then weirdly, without even thinking of The Help, I had Allison Janney as Aurora. But I wasn't even
that
like
would be good.
Putting that together. Idris Elba for Garrett. Paul Dano for Flap, and Ben Whishaw for Sam. I don't know.
Paul Dano as Flap.
As Flap. I want that poster. I want the character poster.
It's the new Zendaya is Michi.
Yes.
Paul Dano is Flap.
I love that name so much. It's so ridiculous.
Yes. Good work. I love that. Okay. Well, here are my options.
Yay.
Educating Rita. I'm going with Jodie Comer because that is her accent completely. She is from Liverpool, and I think she would have a lot of fun with that character. She's very versatile, so I think she could do it. Yeah. Silkwood, I struggled mightily with finding a good one for this. I landed on Margaret Qualley.
Oh, shit. That's amazing.
Yeah. Honestly, any great character actress for Testament would be great. I think in terms of type, like Elizabeth Marvel would work well for that. I would say Carrie Coon, but she basically did this already with The Leftovers.
Yeah.
I landed on someone who was robbed of a nomination this past year and really was able to express a lot of pain and resilience, and that is Danielle Deadwyler.
Okay. Oh, I like it.
And then for the Terms pair, I try to think a little outside the box on this one, and what I came up with for Aurora is Sandra Oh.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Who is great at both comedy and drama. Yeah. And then for Emma, someone who hasn't really had the opportunity to really prove like her dramatic chops quite yet, but is someone who I think is very much on the rise and is capable of it, and is very empathetic as a performer for me personally, Ashley Park.
I was thinking of Ashley Park. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Oh. And I think that the two of them could find a very similar wavelength that could be very emotional, I think. Mm-hmm. So do a different kind of version of Terms. It doesn't have to feel like a direct remake of this version. I think just seeing them as mother and daughter would be fun.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. So more casting stuff real quick. Joey Gentili said, cast these 80s Oscar talents and Karen Black in the roles above: Meg Tilly, Margaret Avery, Marlee Matlin, Michelle Pfeiffer.
Oh my god. Wait, what are we supposed to do? Cast them in these
roles.
These roles. Margaret Avery, Testament. Right?
That is what I had.
Yeah. That seems pretty.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of the roles are as such that you don't have a whole lot of wiggle room with a few of these choices. Yeah. Marlee Matlin, I think Educating Rita.
Possibly.
Maybe.
That's not what I said, but I like it still.
And wait, who else was it?
I went with Meg Tilly. I said Meg Tilly for Educating Rita.
Oh, cool. Okay. Ooh, I could see Meg. I think then I would have to put Meg Tilly as Emma in terms.
Yeah, that works too.
So wait, so who's that? Who does that leave?
Michelle Pfeiffer, who I think would do very fun work in Silkwood. I think that would be interesting for her.
Yeah, I think so. And with her history, she probably turned it down. So,
Knowing, yeah, that's true. And then with Karen Black, put her in the Aurora part.
There you go.
Yeah.
That works.
Works for me.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, and Great Uncle Jude and Jeremy Kaplan want us to talk about the Yentl situation and what happened with Barbara.
I think we in 2023 have seen enough of how Barbra Streisand is seen and treated by the Academy to know that there is a certain amount of animus towards her for whatever combination of reasons, if it is because she's too outspoken or every single part of her that's just a woman, whatever it might be. There's enough examples to that. Prince of Tides later was even more so than this. And that sort of solidified where they regarded Streisand. It's like song and acting we're kind of into, that's cool. Kind of anything else, not so much.
Not even here for acting.
But not even here. I think it would have been pretty cool. And it's honestly, I think like Jane Alexander's nomination over somebody like Streisand here is pretty impressive.
Yeah. It does feel a little pointed.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah.
It is one of those little bit of a Jennifer Lopez and Hustlers kind of things for me, where it just feels like a direct trying to avoid voting for this particular person who is larger than life. Yeah. So I think she's very good in the movie. I think there's just a lot of baggage there, unfortunately. But it's such a bold risk that I'm glad that she was able to do it. And yeah, I don't know. It's just complicated. And I think they wanted to avoid.
Yeah, I mean, I really like Yentl a lot, but yeah, it didn't it didn't do anything really that I guess that would have kind of gotten her there outside of the Globes, obviously, because Globes love her.
Yeah, but, directing win.
Yeah, I mean.
Okay, last question from Sammy Flowers. Very fun one. Rank these 5 famous feuds based off how uncomfortable you would be as a moderator for them. Here we go.
That's right.
Debra Winger, Shirley MacLaine, Glenn Close, Patti LuPone, Bette Davis, Joan Crawford, Olivia de Havilland, Joan Fontaine, and Lea Michele and the entire cast of Glee.
This is so weird. It's so strange. Okay, based on how uncomfortable I would be as the moderator for them.
Yes.
I don't know if I would really be that uncomfortable with any of them. I would be having too much fun. And I would probably be adding fire or fuel to the fire of the onstage.
Violence.
I think that I might be doing that, especially with like Lea Michele and Glee. I would just be like, absolutely
poking the bear.
Team Glee to jump on Miss Shitnerwig.
Not to be confused with Debra Winger farting in Shirley MacLaine's face.
No, not quite the same. I think actually Winger and MacLaine would be a fun thing. But again, like doing it then, doing it now, I don't know. Well, it's just whatever. Fantasy.
I mean, universe. 2 of these pairings are deceased, so like.
Yeah, that might be the most uncomfortable one. Is propping up.
I would be uncomfortable talking to corpses.
Yeah, so. I think that might be it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't think I would be uncomfortable at any of these, honestly, because it would be so much fun. Maybe
Yeah.
Glenn Close and Patti LuPone. Maybe. Because
Yeah.
I think among these, Close would be the most defenseless against her competition. Because Patti LuPone would be absolutely just severe and fatal punches, and Close
Fatality.
would not do that. Whereas I think,
Yeah.
everybody else would be a little bit kind of fun with each other. I don't know, except
Yeah.
maybe Michelle. But yeah, I think Close and LuPone might be the uncomfortable one.
That is what I would say as well, because I would just be so happy to be talking to Glenn in general, but also just like nervous as hell. And I feel like Patti would yell at me, which would be an honor, but also not entirely comfortable.
Exactly. You could like use your phone like during the Q&A and she would destroy you.
Yeah. And I would deserve it.
And you would thank her for it.
Yes. Anyway, on that note, let's move on to our final segment where we will reveal who we think was the runner-up of this Best Actress race. Erik Anderson, you have already basically revealed who you think it was, but I assume you haven't changed your mind since an hour ago.
Yes, I realize I sort of spoiled that, but yeah, Debra Winger is the runner-up.
Because
of the strength of her film, of the performance, and because BAFTA is not a precursor.
How about that? Yeah, I think Debra was the runner-up. She was in the Best Picture winner. She already got in the club nomination for An Officer and a Gentleman, so now she's proving herself even further.
Yeah.
And yeah, I could just see maybe even younger voters valuing her work more than Shirley's and maybe voting for her, but I still think it was probably runaway for Shirley.
Yeah.
And finally, moment of the hour here, who would you have voted for from this lineup?
Oh my god.
Choose a side.
I know. I would choose Shirley MacLaine. That's the one of the few times I can put a personal bias aside. Yeah.
Fair enough. I would also vote for Shirley MacLaine here. It's the performance that, for me, has lasted the longest for me, just in my consciousness. Debra Winger has the scene for me from this entire lineup, but for me, Shirley MacLaine is the most well-rounded, and the material suits her the best, and she rises to the occasion and elevates it even further, I think. So, not a legacy win. It's just the sort of cherry on top of an excellent career that would also continue on for another 40 years anyway. So it's not like a lifetime achievement sort of thing. Anyway, this was very fun and very long, and just always a blast talking with you, Erik. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Kevin. This is so great. I mean, I asked for this year because I love this year so much. It's very meaningful. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And of course, you're invited back anytime. Would look forward to covering a more modern race with you, perhaps. So
I think that would be fun. Yeah, I do stick myself with some old ass years, don't I?
Yeah, it is what it is. Where can people find more of you on the internet?
At AwardsWatch.com every day, and Twitter, because I'll still call it that, at awards_watch, because it's what it is.
Yep.
And everywhere else at just AwardsWatch.
Okay. And thank you all so much for listening. You can find me on Twitter at Kevin_Jacobson and at Oscar Runner-Up. Instagram at And the Runner-Up is. Rate, review, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you liked what you heard and want to hear more, go to patreon.com/AndTheRunnerUpIs, where you can find a whole bunch of bonus episodes, including some with Erik.
Do it!
Yeah. And in 2 weeks, we'll be discussing the Best Actress lineup of 1984, where the nominees were Judy Davis in A Passage to India, Sally Field in Places in the Heart, Jessica Lange in Country, Vanessa Redgrave in The Bostonians, and Sissy Spacek in The River, with the winner being Sally Field. So with that, Thanks again, Erik.
Thank you.
And I will bid you all adieu.